Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Market Open. We are live. It is Thursday, October 23rd. It has been a pretty quick week. I mean, we are one day away from Friday. But we're here. We're live. We got a lot to talk about. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Got a bunch of different headlines going on in the pre-market that we are going to get into. Tomorrow, we will be getting CPI data, so I think today's market activity is definitely going to be a bit contingent on the perception of that CPI data. And we're going to talk about some of the overall projections that some of the street has on what they think will happen with CPI. On top of that, you have a relatively green pre-market. You're not seeing too much red. We did have a pretty nasty day yesterday that ended up recovering towards the end of the day, which was good to see. Not a full recovery, but you did get somewhat of a bit of recovery. So now we have to see if that recovery can continue. S&P 500 is green in the pre-market along with a lot of the other risk assets. So we'll talk about that, and we're going to see if that can continue to be green. Now, S&P, okay, just flipped red. It was green like 10 minutes ago. But overall, it's not as bad as it was yesterday, when yesterday it was down about 1.2% at the worst of it. S&P 500, they're down about 0.14. AMD down 0.5%. S&P or SoFi down 0.4. Google actually green, Grab green, Reddit green, Amazon green, Hoodie down a little bit, and then Palantir down about 0.74. We also have a new Palantir contract that we'll talk about, $200 million deal with Lumen Technologies. So we'll get into that contract and discuss what's going on with Palantir as well. We have some updates on the China trade negotiations. We'll talk about that. Hopefully we are getting closer to somewhat of a, capitulation from both sides to give a little bit and take a little bit. And hopefully we get something where it's like, all right, this is what's going to happen. And maybe that ends up taking place before the meetings in South Korea with Xi. Trump will be going to Malaysia. He's going to do an announcement at 3 p.m. in the Oval Office today. Don't know what the announcement's going to be about. Last time it was about in vitro fertilization, so it might not even be about the economy, but we're going to see later at 3 p.m. what he talks about. And then I believe tomorrow he goes to Malaysia, and then next week he goes to South Korea for those negotiations with President Xi. On top of that, you got Tesla down about 4% right here in the pre-markets. We will be discussing what happened with Tesla. Look, it was not the best earnings in the world. It was definitely not the worst earnings in the world. So the street's giving it a bit of a sideways reaction. 3% down is a similar price to where Tesla was last week. So I think if you're a Tesla shareholder, it's not that big of a deal. But nonetheless, we'll discuss kind of what Elon said on the call and the core arguments that were made on the Tesla earnings. They did miss on EPS, unfortunately, by about 5 cents. They beat on revenue. And then we'll keep going from there. We do have a bunch of other companies in the pre-markets that reported earnings. Pretty much all of them, again, beats on the top and the bottom line, which is really good. So far, 85% of companies that report in the S&P 500 have beat their earnings. And if that can continue going into next week, which is going to be the biggest week for big tech earnings, then that should be good for the broader markets as well. All right, let's get into it. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Maddie, what's up? Dave, what's up? Jason Scott, what's up? Thank you for being here. Hector, how are you doing? Danny, I'm Benny. Erwin, good morning. Thank you all again for being here. We have a lot to discuss. Jay Selton, LM, June, what's up? What's up? Linda, Dunce. How are you late every day with an office in your own apartment? Are you stuck in traffic to your office with all your grinder dates? It's a good question. It's a very good question. You know, honestly, right when you're about to go live, that's when everything gets messed up. The camera starts being weird. The light's not working. You don't have your charger. Like literally right when you're about to go live. And then it takes 2 minutes. And it's just every single time. That's what ends up happening. Dave T, Quarantine Quartet, Kareem, Carson, Jen, Percy. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. All right, so let's get started with the first story. And this first story actually is something I didn't mention for the past couple minutes. But I think it is the juiciest story. And so we might as well start off with this one. And that is the story of Quantum. So what happened over the past week? A lot of these quantum names ended up going down 30 to 40%. It's been pretty much a bloodbath in the quantum ecosystem. Last night, actually, when I was doing my deep dive, I was writing up some, which I hopefully will be out tomorrow. No promises, but working on the Nebius deep dive for tomorrow. I was doing some research, writing on Substack, and then I looked over on Twitter, and this was the first headline that popped up, and I knew this was going to be the story of the next 24 hours, and it has become the story of the next 24 hours. The Trump administration is in talks to take equity stakes in quantum computing firms, including IONQ, D-Wave, and Rigetti. I mean, I saw the headline and I was just like, you got to be kidding me. This is this can't be real life. But this was the headline. Now, to be fair to the Wall Street Journal, Reuters came out this morning and said there's a commerce representative that said they are not specifically in conversations with these companies, but the sources that the Wall Street Journal was using says no, they are in conversation with a lot of these quantum computing companies, and as a result, IONQ up 8% in the pre-market, D-Wave up 16% in the pre-market, and then Rigetti up 9% in the pre-market. All of these stocks are down about 30-40% for the past week. So there's two angles to this. First of all, I want to do the angle of what it would be like if this were to happen, while acknowledging at the same time that there were government officials that said this is not happening. So right now it's kind of a story of he said, she said. We don't officially know if this is going to happen or not. But the stocks are up right now in the pre-market based on the rumor that it's going to happen. And, you know, the rumor coming from the Wall Street Journal will definitely get a lot more people to think that there is a possibility for this. So I went down the rabbit hole and I tried to understand what would be the incentive and motivation for this. And there was a couple people on Twitter that pointed me to this direction. And look, when you go down this rabbit hole, it does start to make a lot more sense. The Deputy Secretary of Defense for the U.S. government is a person named Steve Feinberg. Okay. Feinberg also co-founded a hedge fund called Cerberus Capital Management, and he was the CEO for 30 years of this hedge fund before he left in March of 2024 or 2025, which was like 7 months ago, to become the Deputy Secretary of Defense. That hedge fund has a position to the tune of $100 million in IONQ, which is about 2.4 million shares. So look, again, we don't know exactly what's happening here, but this is starting to make a lot more sense to me. My gut intuition on this is if this were to happen, if the United States government were to take equity stakes in these companies, I do not think it's because Trump believes in quantum computing. I do not think it's because the administration thinks quantum computing is the next evolution of technology that they need to have a major focus in by taking an equity stake in. I personally think, again, gut reaction, that there are some people in that administration that want to make sure they can pump their backs. That's kind of what it's looking like. And here's my reasoning for why. And you know, there's people that can disagree with it, but here's my just overall reason for why I'm open to change my opinion. Number one, why does the US taxpayer have to subsidize quantum? I can understand why the US taxpayer has to subsidize lithium. I can understand why the US taxpayer has to subsidize semiconductors from a national security perspective. I can understand why we have to subsidize rare earth minerals and metals, because at the end of the day, all those products are necessary in every part of our daily life. I have no idea why we have to subsidize quantum. And so, and another reason I don't understand why we have to subsidize quantum, Google, just to the bull case of quantum, Sundar just announced that they had a massive breakthrough in Willow yesterday. That was not subsidized by the US taxpayer. That was Google as a company with their free cash flow, because they actually generate revenue, unlike some of these companies, are able to invest and put the R&D into building out quantum computing. So from that perspective, I don't necessarily understand why the United States government would have to subsidize some of these companies. And it also doesn't make sense to me why the taxpayer has to fit the bill for that, because these are private companies working on, like, you know, we didn't subsidize NVIDIA when they were working on GPUs 20 years ago. They worked on it, they developed the intellectual property, and then it ended up becoming a reality. So I don't know exactly why that's the case. On top of that, if you read through the article, it's a 10 million funding award, aka a 10 million equity stake, that the United States is thinking of taking if this were to happen, based on the reporting from the Wall Street Journal. These companies are worth 15 to 20 billion. $10 million is absolutely nothing. I mean, 10 million, it's like a 0.0001% stake of these companies. This is not like a $8 billion stake like they took in Intel. So from that perspective, it's also pretty weird, because at the end of the day, it's like, well, wait a second, $10 million is absolutely nothing. So the headline in and of itself is more important than the equity stake. 10 billion is not real, bro. These companies are worth almost $20 billion. What's the point of 10 million? Like, that's not even an equity. That's not like a real stake in the company where the United States could be focused on, like, oh, we have this massive stake, we need to make sure we support that the company does well. So look, from my perspective, if this were to happen, and again, you have conflicting reports this morning saying it's not going to happen, but then again, the stocks are reacting as if it is going to happen based on their prices going higher at 9:30. We're going to see when the market opens how this plays out. If this does happen, then the US is basically classifying all these quantum computing names as something that's in the interest of national security to the tune of semiconductors and rare earth metals. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Maybe that is the case. We're going to see what the Trump administration says. If they only take a $10 million equity stake, I think at that point, it's just a headline, because 10 million is nothing substantial to get the street excited, or really to get like people excited that the government actually cares about these companies. And then finally, based on going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, you see some of the people that are part of the administration, see some of the positions they have in terms of their hedge funds and money management funds. And you start to realize, maybe some people, told Donnie T to put a little money into quantum to get the street excited. So that's what we got going on right now. We're going to see how this ends up playing out. Ultimately, we're going to see what the future of quantum computing looks like. But that is the headline. And look, here's the thing. And this is why, as much as I'm not interested in buying these stocks at these valuations, definitely not interested at shorting. And I've, not even taken a put position or bought any of the inverse short funds, because at the end of the day, a lot of these names are driven by hype and narrative. And if the narrative becomes that the US government wants to make sure that quantum succeeds, for whatever reason, the US government is super interested in it, you're likely not going to see quantum stocks go to zero. I mean, you're likely not even going to see them take that 30-40% drawdowns that they've taken over the past week, because once the government is on board, you have a backstop. You have a backstop by the government. So I don't know. Now, Skrelly's thoughts on this yesterday was that this is a perfect short opportunity because this is stupid, and that it's going to lead to an even better entry to people, going short for a lot of these names. Again, I just think shorting these names is tough because you've got to be so right about the narrative, and you might just not be right about the narrative. But it is kind of wild to see that the Trump administration theoretically could take a stake in some of these quantum companies. It also makes you, it also makes you wonder, like, again, what is the purpose of the government and this sort of venture capital strategy? Because I can understand it when it's for Intel, because look, if China invades Taiwan, we need our new chips. I can understand when it's for rare earth metals, because if China has massive export controls, we have to have our own rare earth metals. At what point does it just become a grift? Like, at what point is like, oh, I'm just going to take a stake in Facebook now? It's like, well, there's no need for the government to take a stake. Yeah, but the government wants to take a stake. It's like, well, that doesn't make sense. I'm going to take a stake in SoFi. We need to make sure we secure online banking in the United States. Like, at what point does it become just the government literally doing whatever they want to do to pump different sectors? And I am not a fan of that. I think a lot of people that believe in free market capitalism would not be fans of that. But nonetheless, that could be something that's playing out. So we're going to have to see over the coming years how this ends up happening. I'm very curious to see when the market opens. Does the market actually believe in this story? Do they believe in this narrative, or do these stocks end up getting hit? Yeah, it's a ton of little hanky-panky going on, that's for sure. Ton of hanky-panky that's going on right there. They need to stake in Beyond Meat. Speaking of Beyond Meat, my goodness. Again, if you bought at $7.50, it is what it is, $2.82. Stock went up 300% yesterday, went up 16x over the past week, and now back down below $3. I mean, again, a lot of these things it's just part of, I guess, the nature of how some of these bull markets operate. But there you go. You got Beyond Meat down 21% of the pre-markets. And I guess the juice has been squeezed out of this one as it continues to be flat. S&P 500, 667.73. That's up that's basically flat, 0.01%. Not too bad on the S&P 500. 667.72, and that is now up just a little bit right there, about to go up. When is the government buying Bitcoin? That's a good question. That is also why the government has not even bought Bitcoin yet. Didn't Trump promise the strategic Bitcoin reserve? But they're thinking of buying quantum. I mean, again, it logically does not make sense. Someone tell me how that makes. I don't get it. And you can say quantum's important for defense. I'm like, dude, like the actual defense applications like Palantir software on the battlefield, I think has a little bit more of an implication than some defense experiments in quantum. So like the fact that Trump ran on buying Bitcoin, and we have not bought a single Bitcoin, but we're thinking of putting $10 million into quantum stocks at egregious valuations. I mean, like, what, the government's going to buy in at a $20 billion valuation? Like, it's on a quantum stock that has a couple million in revenue. It's weird. It's very, very weird. But that is the story for the day. And that's what we got right now. All right, so cool. That's what we got with quantum. Let's get into some of these other stories. Tesla. So let's talk about it. Tesla, they missed on the top line. They missed on the bottom line, came in line with expectations on the top line. 422.15. This is what you have right now. We listened to the call yesterday, me and Steve. I mean, it was an okay call. Elon was a bit more energetic than he was from 90 days ago, but it wasn't necessarily that different in terms of a lot of promises and not necessarily an explanation on how they're going to get there. My thing with Tesla here is that energy next year, even if it doubles, it doesn't make a material change in the business in terms of the earnings growth. Robots are not coming next year. In fact, Elon did say that the production for Optimus is going to start in 2026, aka they're going to build production lines, which is super bullish, but that doesn't mean that Optimus is going to be shipped in any meaningful commercial application. So you're not going to get Optimus growth in 2026. So the only thing left then is vehicle deliveries and FSD. Let's say vehicle deliveries are slightly up because rates come down, but they're not up like crazy because the EV credit goes away. The only other vertical I see for Tesla is FSD. And Elon did talk about FSD yesterday, and he mentioned that FSD is going to be the reason why Tesla continues to win. His exact quote on FSD was that, here's the thing, the simple killer app is that if you can text in the car, if we can get unsupervised FSD to be so good that you can text and drive, everyone will buy the car. I'm 100% confident we can make this happen. Look, I think it's very important to be long Tesla and have exposure to the age of physical AI. I just logically, now that it's at this valuation, don't see in 2026 what is the growth curve that can change earnings growth. Tesla is growing negative 30% year over year, and it's trading at 200 times free cash flow and 200, I think it's 145 times PE. Like, and the multiples are whatever, right? Tesla's never really traded on multiples, but the point is, this is not a stock that's at 250. It's not at 200. It's not at 150. It's not even at 300. It's now at 422. And it's not growing. And so I don't know if 2026 is the year where they switch to growth. It's just when you have an NVIDIA that's growing and an Amazon that's growing, a Google that's growing, it's a little tough to bet on something that already has such a stretched valuation and stretched multiple that is not showing the growth. I mean, a lot of these growth stocks that are growing, you can disagree with the multiples, but if they're actually growing, you can at least say they can grow into the valuation. Tesla's going to really have to put up some numbers in 2026, and maybe that's not the year. Maybe it's 27, and you just have to be patient with it in order to get that growth rate. But as of now, that's just not there. And I think every Tesla investor has to be pretty honest with that reality of what's happening. Nonetheless, the call ended by Elon saying, please vote for the pay package. So they did have a bit of a sales pitch right there. I think he will end up getting that vote. I think November 6th is the actual shareholder meeting. They also skipped over a bunch of questions that people cared about, like future products, which also I think pissed off a lot of shareholders because they didn't really talk about the stuff that people wanted to hear about. So it was a quarter. Like it is what it is. It wasn't too good, wasn't too great. Stock's relatively flat, and I think that's what a lot of people expected for us to get on Tesla as well. So that's what we got with Tessie, down about 3.4% right here in the pre-markets. Did you see Wemby last night? I did see Wemby last night. I almost bet on the Spurs, but I ended up not betting. But that man, I mean, he might be going for MVP. He might be going for most valuable player. It's a good game. I didn't watch all of it, but I saw some of the highlights and I was like, damn, he might be the next big thing in San Antonio. All right, so that's what we have in the context of Tesla. Let's talk about some more stuff we have in the macro. Actually, first, let's do Palantir. So Palantir, this was an important thing this morning. Palantir inked a deal with worth $200 million with Lumen. So this was actually a really interesting deal because when I went to AIPCon, Palantir had a similar deal that was like this, or they talked about their Lumen partnership, but now we actually got some real stats on what this Lumen partnership will look like. By the way, Karp's going to be on Fox News today. Karp is going to be on Fox News, so we're going to get to see Karp live. This is a week before earnings, so it's going to be really nice to see him. He's going to be on the Claimant Countdown at 3 p.m., so I will get the clip of that for the market close, and we'll get into what he had to say. But here are some details from the partnership. Lumen and Palantir, industry leaders building core infrastructure for the AI era, today announced a multi-year, multi-million-dollar strategic partnership to help enterprises across every industry deploy AI faster and more securely in complex multi-cloud environments. CEO of Lumen said, Palantir frees data while Lumen moves it. Together, we're uniquely positioned to enable enterprises to unlock their ambitions with unprecedented scale and speed. And then you had Karp on the press release say, our partnership with Lumen has reached new heights. American companies need to unlock immediate value from AI. We are proud to work with Lumen to enable the infrastructure and intelligence layers for our customers to become AI winners. $200 million. So look, if you're long Palantir, I think more and more of these commercial deals are going to continue to operate. One of the things about Palantir is that, and this partnership with Lumen, is that it's going to have downstream effects on a lot of the third-party distributors and vendors that Lumen works with, which is what the press release was going into. And so this should really help their kind of go-to-market approach in regards to dealing with more commercial growth. And, if we can get that 50% number going into Q3, I do think the stock has some good room to potentially run. I did buy a little bit yesterday at 172.38. And so I bought a little bit of the dip yesterday on some of the downside weakness. SMCI, are we moving? Red. SMCI, whoa, 5% down. Okay, what's happening with SMCI? Let's see what we've got here. Don't see the news right now, but SMCI, I don't see a single headline. Oh boy. Hold on. SMCI provides Is this earnings or is this no, this is not earnings. This is, I guess they had earnings. This is, it looks like a preliminary update for the first quarter. SMCI. Okay, so let me just pull this up. I guess it is, no, their earnings call is scheduled for November 4th, but they did give a preliminary update. Okay, so the numbers are new design wins exceeding 12 billion for 2026. Q1 revenue at 5 billion. Oh, that missed guidance. Street thought 6 to 7 billion, came in at 5 billion. Delayed Q1 revenue shifts to second quarter due to order upgrades. Strong demand seen for Blackwell Ultra GPUs and liquid cooling solutions. Company reiterates fiscal year 2026 revenue target of at least 33 billion. Earnings call on November 4th. Okay, so they missed estimates. I mean, it looks like they guided for 6 to 7 a couple months ago, and they came in at 5 billion. Potentially, they could have missed estimates for a good reason, aka they had supply chain bottlenecks on their demand, because they are saying they do have strong demand. But nonetheless, if you miss estimates, that's not the best in the world. There you go, SMCI right there, 49.46. Yeah, what's the point of earnings then? That is kind of weird. SMCI has done this multiple times in the past where they give these like preliminary results, but they don't actually hold the earnings. And then you kind of get that type of a hit. But there you go. Down 6.8%, now down 7%. Oh, that one continuing to get a hit. Just guide for 2030 like Oracle and pump it. Yeah, it's a good idea. Dude, a lot of these companies, if they can just guide for 2030 and say they're going to be okay, then maybe that's what they need to do. All right, so that's the update you got from SMCI. Looks like a little bit of weakness right there. Speaking of, just putting out press releases, this was another insane stat from the Wall Street Journal yesterday. Oracle, NVIDIA, AMD, and Broadcom added $630 billion to their market value in the first day of trading after their partnership announcements with OpenAI. So after all of these companies, which really over the past 3 weeks, we all witnessed these deals that were announced with Oracle, NVIDIA, AMD was last week with the whole 10% of AMD they're going to take, and then the Broadcom 10 gigawatt deal, $630 billion of market cap. That means investors were like, all right, if you guys are going to work with OpenAI, we are willing to keep buying your stock. That is what you saw in terms of market momentum on these names. So, I mean, making those partnerships, giving out that guidance for the long term, that really is the formula, at least so far, in terms of these stocks to be able to win. And that's what we're seeing right now. SMCI right there, down 8.6% on the day. That's what you have on SMCI. Amit, did you see the Mike Alfred investment into Open? Yes, I did. So Mike Alfred, who is the board member of IREN, which I know a lot of you guys like IREN right there, slightly up in the pre-markets. He did buy Opendoor, 644, I believe, is what he bought, 210,000 shares. So, yeah, I mean, look, I'm not that interested in the company. I would really like to see some quarters of execution before even thinking of looking at the investment thesis. But he did buy. He did say he would buy if it did drop 25% back when it was at $8. So, yesterday you had a lot of stocks take a dip and he ended up buying. So he is in the name now. Opendoor right there, 684. That is slightly up in the pre-market. Why is AMD dropping? Not sure. I mean, AMD works with SMCI, but I doubt that the SMCI miss on revenue is a reason AMD would miss. But you do have AMD right there down about 1.1%. Reddit's up 1%. Then Google right there, 0.36%. That is at 252 as well. All right, so that is what we got. That's what we got with Google. Again, Pouncer did get that $200 million deal with Lumen. Just talked about that. Very good to see. Karp will be live on Fox News today, and we're going to see what he has to say. All right, so let's go through some other stats that we've got going on. First of all, remember that big crypto roundtable that the Fed had a couple of days ago? Here is what Brian Armstrong had to say about that roundtable and basically where crypto legislation is starting to get a lot more clarity in the United States.
Yeah, well, we had great meetings with the Democrats in the Senate and on the Republican side today. And the good news is that there's strong bipartisan support and will to get this market structure legislation done. It's important for America, and the 50 million Americans who've used crypto want to see it get done. And so one date we heard floated was, let's try to get this markup done before Thanksgiving. I think that there's 90% of the issues are already aligned on and agreed, and there's draft text going back and forth, a lot of great cross-functional collaboration happening. That last 10% are the remaining issues, and everyone committed to get in the room together and work it out, and hopefully we'll see some draft text or get it out of committee by Thanksgiving.
Yeah, well, So you got Brian Armstrong, CEO of Coinbase, feeling pretty damn bullish about the legislative commitment that the United States will be able to take for crypto. Yes, the government is shut down still. This is the 22nd day of the shutdown. However, they did have that roundtable, which, like, I guess wasn't really part of the government. It was part of the Fed, even though the Fed is part of the government, but they still had that shutdown, or they still had that roundtable. And Brian Armstrong does feel bullish that there can be some updates on crypto. Andreessen Horowitz, one of the best venture capital firms in the country, did put out their State of Crypto report. And there were some pretty interesting things that they said in the State of Crypto. They've been pretty big crypto investors for a while. A couple of slides I wanted to highlight. Take a look at this. They said stablecoins have officially found product market fit, now rivaling the world's largest payment networks in transaction volume. And the reason for this is because the U.S. is recognizing the strategic value of stablecoins as they can become a top holder for treasuries. And as a result of being, a massive holder of treasuries, obviously the government would be interested in stablecoins continuing to win, because that would reduce the cost of borrowing. On top of that, Robinhood listed Hype for spot trading today. Hype is a pretty important cryptocurrency in the crypto ecosystem. It's up 10% right now based on that Robinhood listing. So you're getting a lot more listings happening on Robinhood as well. Real world assets are bringing traditional finance and crypto on chain. 30 billion, including corporate bonds, actively managed strategies, government debt, stocks, alternative funds, commodities, private credit, etc., have come on chain. This is what I think Vlad is very excited about in the context of Robinhood, because he thinks if we get a lot more real world assets on chain, to the tune of, Larry Fink thinks $4.5 trillion could end up happening to come on chain. That would be a massive market. And if Robinhood takes just a small part of that $4.5 trillion that comes on chain, that would be a massive move for their ecosystem. Speaking of Robinhood, by the way, Cathie Wood bought the dip yesterday. 150,000 shares of Hoodie, probably at that 122 to 125 range. We did get all the way down to 120, backed up to about 128 in the pre-markets today. But Cathie Wood also did buy the dip on Hoodie. I actually spoke to one of their head Robinhood fintech analysts at the Legend Summit, and they are really bullish Hood, like really. Like, I've talked to him multiple times, and he's like one of the main people, I think his name is Nick, that like convinced Cathie to like really like seriously look at Hood. And I think any dip that they get, they are just so convinced that Hood is going to win when it comes to like the global financial ecosystem. That is why, they're more excited to probably continue buying this dip. And the last slide right here that I'll show from this crypto report is that the U.S. has advanced key crypto legislation, bringing regulatory clarity to the industry. So you've got just a lot more clarity, especially with the Genius Act, on where crypto is going, where the application of crypto is going. You have an administration that's not really scared about crypto. I mean, Paul Atkins, the SEC chair, is nothing like Gary Gensler. It's literally a 180 in terms of how he thinks about the market. And as a result, I think that's the reason, at least while Trump is in office, to have some type of exposure to crypto. I know Bitcoin and Ethereum have been relatively flat in October, but when you've got real use cases, you got real world applications, and you have the government that is supporting it, which might be the bull case for quantum if the government starts seriously supporting it, you're probably going to get the value of these assets to go up. And as a result, you could also get some momentum in some of the crypto ecosystem. So that's what you have right there. Robinhood 127.20 in the pre-markets. Palantir right there, 174. Tesla is still down 3.3%. NVIDIA down 0.5%. Then the S&P 0.07% down on the day. SMCI still getting hit. A little recovery. No. It was down 9. Now it's down 3. That's not too bad for SMCI. Wow, it went from 46 to 50. So if you stepped in at 46, I mean, look, did it deserve a 10% drop after missing revenue? Probably not. If the reason they're missing is because of supply chain issues, not demand issues. Like, if there's a demand problem, then a lot of the semi stocks are going to take a hit. But we know based on TSM earnings and ASML earnings, there's not really a demand issue that's going on. So TSM right there below 300 as well, 289, slightly up in the pre-markets. But SMCI getting a little bit of a boost there. So that is what you've got. Circle as well, another big stablecoin company that's been making a little bit of a move over the past week. Still down from that 298 high that it got to a couple months ago, but up 3x since IPO, 125 in the pre-markets. Okay, China. Let's talk a little bit about that. This is what Jameson Greer said on what's going on with China and essentially how they think this negotiation is going to play out.
So in Geneva, we had an agreement where they would limit their rare earth export controls, they'd keep their retaliatory tariffs down, and we would suspend a good portion of our tariffs on the reciprocal tariff. And so we kept our part, we kept that tariff low, and we had very cordial and constructive discussions over the summer. And then again, a couple of weeks ago, the Chinese decided they were just going to go ahead and expand those controls on rare earths again, not on just us, but on the whole world. And now you hear a lot of narratives from the Chinese side or their surrogates saying, well, you know, the Americans have put a lot of controls on us over the past few years, or they put out a new rule that would, you know, to avoid evasion of U.S. export controls that they didn't like, or their fees on ships. So they're trying out a lot of different narratives when the reality is they just want to exert economic control on the world. They started in April with the rare earth magnets. They're using anything else that has happened as a pretext. The reality is we made a promise in May to keep our reciprocal tariff on them at 10%. We kept that promise, and they have not kept theirs.
Okay, so obviously tensions are a bit high in regards to the U.S.-China relations on these rare earth export controls. Again, Trump has been de-escalating to an extent over the past couple of days, but that meeting in South Korea really is going to set the tone for if we can get to a reasonable deal. And, you know, tensions with China are not the best, but also tensions with Russia just escalated yesterday as we have now sanctioned two of the biggest oil companies in Russia.
Today is a very big day in terms of what we're doing. Look, these are tremendous sanctions. These are very big. Those are against their two big oil companies. And we hope that they won't be on for long. We hope that the war will be settled. We just answered having to do with the various forms of missiles and everything else that we're looking at. But we don't think that's going to be necessary. We would like to see them just take the line that has been formed over quite a long period of time and go and let's, go home. Last week they had almost 8,000 soldiers killed. Many Russians were killed last week. Many Ukrainians were killed last week. We think it's ridiculous and would like to have it end. Today is a very big day in terms of...
So as a result of sanctioning the oil companies in Russia, oil prices are up 6%. This is one of the biggest one-day moves, or at least early morning moves, that we've seen on oil. And it's quite incredible because, oil below 60 in and of itself was like, generally really good for the economy, really good for gas prices, all that stuff. But the fact that it's back up now, again, Trump said the sanctions might be temporary and the, the oil situation with Russia might be resolved if they get to a ceasefire or at least end the war. Same thing that, he kind of said with Modi, that Modi would stop buying oil until the war is officially done with Russia and Ukraine. But nonetheless, it is spiking up oil prices. And that's not necessarily the best thing going into Q4 earnings, because at the end of the day, a lot of these oil prices directly affect the input costs for a variety of companies. And, that could affect their margins. But it's still pretty reasonable at 62, even if it's not 58. Now, if we get a spike up to 70, where we were 8 months ago, that would be a little bit different. But you do have oil that is green. SMCI with a pretty amazing recovery right here. I mean, again, barely down based on these projections. I would chalk it up to the fact that they said it's a supply issue, not a demand issue. And that's why the street had a knee-jerk reaction, and now it's starting to recover. But if you stepped in at that dip at 46, you got a little bit of momentum. Dig says it could also create inflation. Yeah, it could also cause a little bit more inflation. And given that inflation has been steadily coming down, oil prices going up wouldn't necessarily help. Now, here's the median forecast for the CPI report that we're going to get tomorrow. Again, we are getting CPI on a Friday. We usually never get it on a Friday, but the government shut down, so we're kind of making an exception here. The median forecast is 3.1%, and core is also at 3.1%. So we should be expecting a 3 handle on inflation. And, it is what it is. I think we were at just 2.8 last time. So it is a bit of an increase, but overall, if the street is expecting it, that shouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I do not think a high CPI or a hot CPI is going to stop anything in the context of the Fed. I think the Fed is going to continue to do what they have to do. If you look at the probabilities for a federal rate cut going into October, which it's coming up, folks, October 29th, it's going to happen in 6 days. We were at 98.9%. These rates are coming down. And I think, quite frankly, that's the reason why the 10-year has been doing what it's doing. Yesterday, we closed below 4.0 again. We are up a little bit in the pre-markets, but it's been 2 days of a 10-year that's basically stayed below 4, which is pretty incredible to see. Now, the price of gold is up right here, 2.28%. So you're getting a little bit of a move back in gold. Now, some of these gold targets have also been quite incredible. JP Morgan put out a new report this morning, and they said, we believe gold prices could exceed $8,000 an ounce by 2028 as investors increasingly use it as a hedge for equity risk, which would make gold a $60 trillion asset over the next 3 years. So, I mean, I don't know. Gold got rid of 2.5 trillion over the past couple of days. Now it's starting to recover. Maybe the silver commodity copper trade is just taking a little bit of a breather, just like the momentum stocks took a little bit of a breather. Where is Oklo in the pre-markets? Oklo's still down. I mean, these quantum names probably would continue to be taking a hit in the pre-market if it wasn't for that Wall Street Journal update that we got yesterday. For those that are just joining, the Trump administration is thinking of taking equity stakes in some of these quantum stocks. But a lot of the other momentum names are not really getting that much love. Big Bear is still stuck below $7. Oklo still down 0.3%, down from, it was at 150 on Monday. So again, we're going to have to really see if those names can recover, or are they going to continue to be stuck. The rare earth names getting a little bit of love in the pre-market. CRML is still down, but MP is up a little bit. USAR is up a little bit, and then TMQ is up about 2% as well. Is Oklo a quantum stock? Oklo is not a quantum stock. It is a nuclear energy stock, but maybe if they add quantum to it, that helps as well. Amazon. Let's talk about Amazon. So Amazon right here, trying to get back to 220. We do have some updates on Amazon as we try to get into the earnings and see what will happen. Amazon introduced a new AI tool called Help Me Decide this morning. It will analyze your browser history and preferences to recommend the right product for you with just one tap. So you've got Amazon creating even more, I guess, intuitive ways to kind of guess what you're doing. It's called Help Me Decide AI, as you can see right there. I mean, look, I don't think I've ever asked this question, but put in the chat, how many times do you buy from Amazon a month? Like, if you had to guess, I would say for me, it's at least once a month. At least once a month, there's something I probably have to order. For my mom, it's probably like, there's 30 days in a month. She probably does 600 times a month. So it's like 2 per day or 100 per day, something like that, 50 per day. Like she finds a way to make sure it's Christmas every morning or every afternoon when we get a package. Wow, look at this. 12 to 15, 30, 20, my girlfriend every other day. Of course, 6, 7, why not? 4 to 5, 2 to 3. My daughter usually 5, maybe. I mean, this is another one of my bull cases for Amazon. It's like, this company is not going anywhere. Any incremental increase in margin, you are going to see the stock have billions and billions of dollars or more net income, because all of us just continue to buy and use Amazon. It's the nature of how we engage with the company. So Amazon right there at 218. Yeah, I mean, so many of people saying that they use it. Doug says 3 or 4 times a day. Look, if that's the case, and they can make it even more intuitive for people to use Amazon by having AI actually assist in the product adoption, yeah, that's not going anywhere. On top of that, Morgan Stanley came out yesterday and said, hey, we think, remember that headline 2 days ago that Amazon's trying to replace 600,000 workers over the next 4 or 5 years? Morgan Stanley says that's going to save them $4 billion in annual savings through 2027 or by 2027, because they're not going to have to be paying humans, and they will have a lot more warehouse robotics expansion. And as a result, even if they might hire more people, the people that they're going to not have to use because of the robotics automation is going to save them $4 billion. I mean, could you imagine a company that doesn't have the best margins, at 12.4% operating margins, to save $4 billion a year? And imagine that's the worst it's going to be. Imagine by 2030, that's like $10 billion a year, right? As robotics gets better and better. This is a massive story in margin expansion and cost cutting, led by innovation via AI and robotics. And there's just not that many companies that are positioned that have people buying stuff 7 times a day from their website, like an Amazon. That's why it continues to be a bit more bullish for what we're seeing on Amazon. Benny says it's going to be way more. Yeah, I mean, it probably will be a lot more. Rushil says, I work in science team for designing Amazon US supply chain network, and I can tell you that a lot of people are buying every day. I wonder how many people are using Amazon's website. What's the average of every minute of every hour? Every hour, just in the United States, how many people are on the website? Don't they have these stats? How many? Hold on, let me. How many orders does Amazon get per hour? I feel like they disclosed this stuff a year ago. Yeah. Okay, so it is Wow. On an average hour, okay? Average hour for Amazon, 536,000 orders. During days like Prime Day, 5.1 million per hour was in 2024. That is wild, bro. That is 530,000. That means in the next hour, 530,000 products on average are going to be bought on Amazon. Yeah, I mean, it is pretty incredible. And again, the scope and scale of the size of that business, that's not going anywhere. So look, I continue to believe it's undervalued, but they're going to have to put up some really good results to get the street to be a bit more excited. American Airlines, they had earnings. United Airlines crushed it. Delta, Southwest crushed it. Here's what we got on American Airlines, and it should give us a little bit more of a take in terms of the consumer and what's going on with travel.
Airlines reporting a smaller than expected loss of 17 cents a share. That compares with the street expecting a loss of 28 cents a share. Revenue of $13.69 billion, just a smidge higher than the street. But then when you look at the numbers within the numbers, there was nothing to write home about with this quarter due to operational issues and weather in July. They didn't swing to positive unit revenue until September. As a result, revenue per seat mile in the third quarter down 1.9%. Cost per seat mile up 3.9%. Pre-tax margin negative 1%. And all of the segments, when it comes to revenue in the quarter, they were negative year over year. Domestic.
So American Airlines, not the best earnings. Dude, how do we have 2 minutes until the market opens? This was the fastest pre-market. Like did we just yap away 40 minutes? I didn't even notice. All right, we got the market open in 2 minutes, but American Airlines, not the best earnings. Nonetheless, the stock is up because the street is okay with at least some of the headline numbers. As you can see right there, American Airlines up 5.2% on the day. IBM is down big. Their consulting revenue was down. That stock down 8%. IBM is one of the bigger players in quantum computing. So the fact that they're down 8%, but there's all this quantum excitement in the broader investing ecosystem is kind of weird. But nonetheless, it's kind of ironic. When you actually have to put up real numbers and you miss against your numbers, the stock goes down. When you don't put up any numbers, the stock can go up. But IBM taking a hit right there, down about 8%. And we're going to see if that can recover. NVIDIA, 0.01% at 180. And then NVIDIA or Tesla at 420. That's down about 4.3%. We got about a minute until the market opens. Last quick stat before we get into it. Buybacks, folks, they're coming back. Buyback authorization announcements have risen 16% year over year to a record 1.15 trillion. This is the second consecutive yearly increase since the 2020 low. Share repurchase authorizations have more than tripled. Goldman Sachs is warning that watch out for November, because right now it's in a blackout period, but because companies have earnings coming up. But in November, they're expecting a record amount of buybacks, over 100 billion in 1 month to end out Q4 and to end out 2025. That could be a really good setup. I mean, stocks going down, a lot of these companies being like, hey, we have to buy back our stock anyway before the end of the year. Our stock is way cheaper than it was back in August and September. Let's buy the dip. And that could be a massive tailwind for the markets as well that we're going to keep an eye on as we get into the end of the year. All right, here we go. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It is Thursday, October 23rd, 9:30 a.m. The stock market is now open. All right, wake your ass up. Unfortunately, Tessie getting hit right here, down about 5%, 418. There's the red candle. It was at 447 yesterday. Missed on EPS. They came in line with expectations on revenue. Let's see if people step in and buy the dip, or if this one continues to take a bit of a hit. Palantir goes green with that $200 million contract that they announced with Lumen Technologies today. Hoodie, 128.41. Let's see if Hood can get back up to 130. Kathy Wood did buy the dip of about 150,000 shares yesterday. S&P goes green, 668. Not too bad on the S&P 500. NVIDIA right there, 180.50. That's up 0.13%. SoFi, that's up 0.5%, 27.40. I did buy my 500 shares of SoFi. Average is 26.88. So you guys can stop asking me to buy SoFi before earnings because I bought it. I'm in. We're either going to bag hold or we're either going to ride it higher. But SoFi right there, 27.30. That's green. Grabby Grab, that's up 1%, 567. Google, 253.75. That's green. Amazon, 218. That's green. Salesforce is up. Meta's up. PayPal's up. Elf is up. Apple's up. SMCI still down based on those preliminary earnings that they gave on the missed expectations of revenue, but it was down a lot worse. It was at 46, so rebounded here back up to 51. 50. BMNR, are we going down? We hit 47 yesterday on this, so got a little bit of a rebound at 48.22, but it was a pretty nasty day yesterday for BMNR. Ethereum right there stuck at 3,800, and then Bitcoin at 109. Bitcoin was at 106 yesterday, so that also got a little bit of a rebound. Nebius, I do still have my 98 put that expires tomorrow. Maybe I don't get assigned. Nebius right there at 100, that's up 2%. So tomorrow, if it stays above 98, we're going to see if I get assigned or not. AppLovin, that's up 0.5%. Circle goes red. Pinterest is up a little bit. Palo Alto is up a little bit, about 0.5%. Where is Rocket Lab? That is green, 1.1%. How about ASTS? That is also green. ASTS did lose that $100 level. It's at 72. B. Riley did upgrade ASTS to 90 today. So, or I think it was 95. So they did get an upgrade this morning. The essential thesis of the upgrade was increased revenue growth potential on their existing partnerships with telecommunication companies. But the stock right here is still down from that $100 level that it hit a couple weeks ago. 72.41 on ASTS. Uber right here up 1%. NVIDIA goes red, basically flat. I did buy NVIDIA yesterday for the first time in a long time. 177.50 was the price I got yesterday. Haven't bought since 159 on NVIDIA. So it was a small buy, and the idea is going into earnings, I think it'll be a strong earnings. I don't think we're going to get China revenue though. So, the street's going to have to overlook the lack of China revenue, but we were just at 195. I think any move back up to the 190s by the end of the year wouldn't be too bad. Google right there, 252. Reddit, that's up 2.4%. And then you got PayPal, again, that's up 1.4%. Serve Robotics, that is green on the day, up about 1%. What about Rivian? How's that one doing? Rivian down, not really reacting too much to Tesla earnings. Tesla getting hit, 417, still down 4.7%. 4.7% on Tessie. Trump will be making an announcement at 3 p.m. today. Not sure exactly what he's going to be talking about, but he will be making an announcement. Maybe it's about the shutdown. I mean, we're 22 days in. Maybe that changes, but could be on the shutdown. Let's look at some of the high momentum names. Oklo down 2.7 again. Oklo has been down every single day this week. It continues to get hit. How about the quantum stocks after that Wall Street Journal announcement? D-Wave up 14%, IONQ up 5%, and Rigetti up 7%. So again, the Trump administration, Wall Street Journal reported yesterday, thinking of taking equity stakes in these companies. You had some senior officials come out and say, we are not negotiating with these companies for an equity stake, but the market doesn't care. The headline alone is enough to get these stocks to get higher. And so, the shorts are really getting hit if you did go short over the past couple of days based on this announcement. But those stocks continue to go green. Big Bear AI, that stock is at 665, basically flat. How about Nano Nuclear? That one is up about 1%. SMR, that one is down on the day. And then MP, some of the rare earth stocks continue to go down as well, relatively flat, but that one below $70. Whereas Beyond Meat, are we still above 3? We are at 291, down 18%. It was at 850 at one point in the pre-markets yesterday. It stayed at $6, got halted 7 times. And now it's back down to 280. Oscar's getting hit, unfortunately, because of Molina Health. So Oscar down 7% right there. Molina had a crappy quarter. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Down 20% on the day. Why was it crappy? As you can see on that red candle right there. Well, they decreased guidance. And it didn't even really have to do with Medicaid or ACA subsidies. It had to do with some other parts of their business that technically shouldn't really affect Oscar, but because it's in the same sector, Oscar is going to get hit. Same thing with UNH. But if you're in Molina, CNC, all those healthcare companies, and you're getting a relatively red day across the board, and that's just part of it. These are some of the healthcare stocks. Yeah, look at them. I mean, you have 2 names that are red: HCA and Cardinal. Teladoc, Molina, Clover, Humana, even Tempest, CVS, UNH, Oscar, UNH down almost 2%, Elevance, all these guys, and HIMSS, 47.26. Those are also red. Now, Lending Club had a great earnings. They beat on the top and the bottom. Revenue's going up 30%. That's up 14% of the day. I think this is your biggest bull flag for SoFi. I mean, if Lending Club is putting up numbers like this, we know that SoFi is going to put up some pretty good numbers, and their underwriting is going to be pretty good as well. So, that bull argument for can SoFi really get the $35 bump after good earnings? Maybe that would happen. Opendoor, where is Opendoor? What do we have going on? Opendoor is up 3.3%, 707. So Opendoor going green. Again, a lot of these hardcore momentum names, they did get hit pretty hard over the past 2 weeks at this point. So maybe they bottom, and maybe you get some people stepping in. Maybe they don't go back to all-time highs, but they do at least not get hit as bad as they were over the past 2 weeks. Or they potentially just stabilize, make a little bit of a run higher, and then continue to get hit with the momentum drawdown. So we're going to have to keep an eye on them. But open door right there is up 2.7%. S&P goes green, 668.80. 668.80 on the S&P. Ethereum trying to push for it, continuing 38.64. This one has just been stuck below 4,000 ever since the Truth Social China post. That's what really wrecked Ethereum, and then it hasn't been able to really recover since. So, getting back above 4,000 would be nice. SMCI right there at 4%, still down. MicroStrategy is 282. Little green. The Bitcoin miners, let's take a look at them. A lot of these got really hit over the past couple of weeks, but they're starting to recover. Bitfarm's not really recovering. I mean, this thing was at 660. It's at 403 right here. So this one's still wrecked, but at least green on the day. Marathon, that's up 1%. Riot's up 2%. Galaxy, I still don't understand why Galaxy took a 15% hit yesterday, given like they had a pretty good earnings, but that one's still down. Iran getting a small recovery right there, up 3%, 53.73. And then Cypher up 1.3, CleanSpark up 1.5, TeraWolf down on the day. Celsius, how is that one doing? Celsius is green, 62.12. So you got some momentum there. Nebius, 101.64. Okay, bounce from 97 from yesterday. And then CoreWeave, which fell to 114. CoreWeave at 120. A lot of those data center plays starting to move in tandem. Doug says, amid all my late September, early October gains are wiped out as of last night, I'm back to September 22, 2025 balance. Yeah, I mean, look, this is similar for a lot of people. A lot of the gains that happened towards the end of September, I mean, it was because of a massive bull run, not only in the S&P, but in a lot of these like momentum names. A lot of those names have come back to reality. Even Tesla, right? Tesla at 417, now 5% down on the day. That's wiping out a lot of gains. The crypto stocks wiping out a lot of gains for people just because Bitcoin and Ethereum have been flat. So it's like September, the market gave us some love. October, it's taken it away. And hopefully that sets up a really strong way for November to not only beat earnings, but for buybacks and a lot more liquidity to enter the markets. We're going to get money market fund updates later at the end of the day. I mean, we lost 17 billion last week. Let's see if the idea of rate cuts going into next week is enough to get more money out of those funds. Right now, 7.37 trillion still on the sidelines. Who's buying the Tesla dip? Who's buying the Tesla dip? Let me do a poll right here in the chat on who's buying the dip. 4 is what we've got. Are you buying the Tessie dip? Why are you guys saying hell no? Why are you guys so aggressive? So aggressive with Tessie, bro. Goodness. So aggressive. I do get it though, dude. Like I don't know what the growth story is for 2026. And I would love to understand what it is, but even based on what Elon said yesterday, I think it's more of a 2027 story. It's not really a 26 story. Which again, it's what he said 2 quarters ago. He said by the end of 2026, you can expect some growth, but don't expect it for the next 3-4 quarters, which would imply that until 4Q 26, you're probably not going to have massive growth. Tesla at 270 would be a dip. The dip is at 350. The Tesla diners, bro. A 2032 story. Okay, I don't know if it's 2032, but it doesn't feel like it's 2026. I'll buy it if it goes to 300. Wow. Okay, so everyone's waiting for a lot lower than these levels. My average is 284. I wouldn't buy here. I'm debating on selling. Okay, who's selling? Put in the chat if you're selling. Tesla, they're 419. The only compelling case to sell, if you're trading it and you don't have this like 10-year thesis on it, is that I don't know how Q4 deliveries are going to beat last year's deliveries at around 495,000 with no EV tax credit. The only argument you can say is rate cuts and maybe like some holiday promotion, but Tesla doesn't really do that often. So I don't know. We're gonna have to see, what could get Q4 to get some more excitement on Tessie. But that's what you have right there. Now, average daily miles driven using FSD, that has grown substantially. 14 million miles a day because of FSD are driven, which is quite incredible. So you got some stats that are continuing to show more and more excitement and momentum. And $506 billion of revenue Tesla has generated in its total lifetime. So $500 billion the company has generated. It's just, the earnings yesterday weren't exactly the earnings that everyone wanted to see. Tesla right there, 421. 421. BMNR, what do we got going on? 4860, getting a little bit of a bounce right here. Amid the January 2027 call debit spreads for MicroStrategy are a nice Forex if Bitcoin takes off. Yeah, I mean, look, well, the inevitable question for going leveraged long via options on anything crypto related, Robinhood included, is do you believe Bitcoin's going to make a move that people, have been saying it's going to make? And again, guys, we're barely above 100,000 on this. Like, it just feels so fragile. And I think when it gets to the low hundreds, every time people come and buy the dip, because at the end of the day, it's Bitcoin and people want to buy. But it is not creating that euphoric 150, 170 move that a lot of people thought would make. And I think it needs that for a MicroStrategy option or a Coinbase option, right? Maybe it just needs rate cuts. Maybe we really just need rate cuts. Maybe that's the missing piece here to get this moving. SoFi up 1.3%, 27.50. But we're going to have to see if we actually get these rate cuts. JP Morgan expects the Fed to end quantitative tightening next week. That makes sense. We know the Fed is going to likely, Jay Powell even said that he's likely going to, tamper down on QT. Vertiv, that moving, getting a little bit of reaction. Okay, there you go, up 5%. That one had a great earnings yesterday. That one got hit. Some of the other companies that had earnings today, so we talked about American Airlines. Let me pull up some of the other names. So we had AAL. T-Mobile, they beat on revenue, beat on EPS, missed on revenue. T-Mobile, that stock is down 2.4, but you did have some decent results, which is good. Blackstone beat by 24% on EPS. Private equity firm beat by 6% on revenue, 3.3 versus 3.1, 152 versus 123. Blackstone, that stock is down 2.4, but you did have a beat on the top and the bottom. And then you had Honeywell that beat by 10% on EPS, beat by 2% on revenue, which is not the worst thing in the world. Again, a lot of these companies either coming in line with expectations or really beating. Honeywell, that's up 5.4% on the day. That's what you got. Amit, what's your target for BMNR this year? I thought a 70 to 75 target was reasonable. And I know a couple of weeks ago that sounded pretty bearish, but I was not really in the camp that 100 to 150 or 500, like some of these people on Twitter were saying, just because I don't know if ETH gets to 8,000-9,000 like some people are saying, but I think ETH could get to 5,500 to 6,000. And I guess now it seems more ambitious given that ETH's been flat. But when ETH was at 4,300 when I made that prediction, I was like, well, if it can get to 55, even if it can get to 5, you're going to see BMNR get a bit more of a multiple. Oh, speaking of BMNR and Ethereum. This came out this morning, which I thought was pretty incredible to see. Take a look at this. You've now got international companies that are starting Ethereum treasuries. So you've got this company. I don't know what they do. It's called Quantum Solutions. I don't know if they're a quantum firm. I've not looked into them. But the CEO of the company said, we just bought 2,365 Ethereum in the last 7 days. Now, I really don't care about this company's digital asset treasury. Like, I could care less about that. I care about Tom Lee and BMNR. But it is really nice to have more and more of these guys pop up and buy Ethereum because it helps Ethereum's price. I don't know if they're going to be able to accretively dilute and have a premium against their NAV. That's a different question. Amazon, by the way, breaking above 220, but it does mean more demand on the actual asset itself, which is good to see. So the question is, how many more of these pop up and how many more of these continue to buy Ethereum? And, over the long term, we're going to see if that ends up playing out. Has Tom Lee explained why he thinks Bitcoin will go to 200? I mean, from what I understand by listening to him, it's a combination of Fed policy easing and overall crypto tailwinds going into Q4. By the way, Hood and Palantir going green on the day along with SoFi. S&P as well. Look at that green candle. Almost 670. We're getting some green across the board, folks. The only thing that's red is Tesla. Getting some green across the board. But yeah, he thinks crypto tends to do well in Q4, and he thinks that the Fed easing probably will be a tailwind. So that is his argument for why 200,000 could happen. Dude, we're getting a bit of a pump. We're getting a bit of a pump, which means we're going to get a dump in like 5 minutes, right? We're going to get a dump in like 5 minutes. Dude, it's a nice pump. Meta, look at we haven't seen 740 on Meta in a minute. AppLovin's up 1%. Circle's up a bit. Pinterest is up. How about Oklo? If Oklo goes green, we're really pumping. Okay, Oklo's not going green yet, but at least it's not down. When Oklo goes green, that's how you know we are pumping for the day. We are pumping for the day. 669.70. GM all-time highs. I mean, look, General Motors deserves it. I know a lot of us probably are not investors in this company. I don't own this stock, but dude, they had a fantastic quarter. I mean, they had a growth quarter. And, you know, they're not a $1.5 trillion company. They're a $65 billion company. So the pressure on them to perform is not as great as Tesla, but still, they had a great quarter. They executed. And as a result, you're getting some excitement right here. Speaking of crypto, this is Fed Governor Waller talking about crypto yesterday at that crypto roundtable that the entire Fed had. And here is what one of the people who votes for rate cuts had to say about crypto.
This is an acknowledgement that distributed ledgers and crypto assets are no longer on the fringes, but are increasingly woven into the fabric of the payment and financial system. Now, before we hear from these innovators, I would like to touch on roles that the Federal Reserve plays to support the private sector. These include serving as a convener to solve coordination problems and operating core payment and settlement infrastructure. We are also looking ahead, conducting hands-on research on tokenization, using smart contracts, and the intersection of AI and payments for use in our own payment systems.
We are looking at tokenization, AI, and the intersection of blockchains for our own payment infrastructure. I mean, dude, how much more bullish could you get? That is one of the Fed presidents, potentially one of the next Fed chairs, saying that we are ready as a Federal Reserve to start embracing the crypto ecosystem. Sounds like a lot of ETH-related stuff. That is correct. By the way, I finally sat down yesterday and I read Devin Ryan's report, who's one of the only analysts on Wall Street that I actually trust in fintech, on SBET. And outside of him picking SBET over BitMine, the simple reason is SBET trades at below NAV, so he thinks it's more attractive because you're getting it way cheaper than paying 1.4 times for BMNR. If you go through his report, it's like 7 pages on why Ethereum is going to win. And it's like you're getting more and more validation from Wall Street analysts that are starting to think, no, this Ethereum thing is not a joke. Like, this is going to be one of the global financial blockchains that controls the payment solutions that get on rail to distributed ledgers. And as a result of that, there's going to be value that's accruing to that network. And the reason he initiated a $50 target on SBET is because he thinks it's really cheap because they're trading at 0.83 times NAV. And so if you believe in Ethereum, then you believe in that sort of leverage against Ethereum. And then he just wants the most juicy price as an analyst, which is SBET over BMNR. But the point is, he's very bullish Ethereum. And he called Robinhood at $8. He's one of the analysts that I actually like listening to. It's nice to see different perspectives from people on the street that usually are skeptical of digital asset treasuries. But his report was like, no, we think it makes a lot of sense because Ethereum's going to win. And then you have the Fed being as supportive as they're supportive as they talk about on that video. You might start to see a lot more of that momentum, even if it doesn't happen all at once. Robinhood right there, 129.30. That's up 1.63. Another update right here on Robinhood. Banking is out for some people, not everybody, and it looks pretty incredible. It looks pretty freaking incredible. So I got tagged in a couple posts yesterday on the UI of what banking looks like. They are giving you guys 3.75% in your checkings account. I think that's going to get a lot of people to switch. Look at that. If you set up direct deposit, you get 3.75% in your checkings account. There's no other bank that does that. There's the UI right there. Savings APY, the same thing, 3.75%. And then there is all the different elements to the user experience. I mean, I think when banking rolls out, it is going to be a big, big product. And when that does happen, it's going to be pretty exciting as well. IBM is down because they missed on a couple estimates. I don't think there's a meaningful reason for why they should be down that much. They were down 9%. Now they're down 4%. So you got a little bit of a recovery right there on the green candle. Tesla's still down 4%. Everything else is pumping. S&P, wow, 670. We got it. 670. 670 on the S&P. There you go. Look at her. She's trying to go to 671. NVIDIA up 0.5%. Google back to 255. SoFi 28, baby. I'm with you guys on SoFi. Let's go to the moon. Let's please go to the moon. Dude, this 6-7 thing is getting ridiculous, bro. This 6-7 thing is getting ridiculous. But there you go. You got SoFi making a move. Grab flat on the day, 561. Google 254. Reddit, that's up 4%. Reddit took a hit yesterday as well. Duolingo, that's up 1%. Let's look at the heat map. I would think we're getting some pretty big green. Yeah, look at that. The only thing that's red is Tesla, T-Mobile, and IBM, and then healthcare. Tesla, T-Mobile, IBM, and healthcare are red. Almost everything else is green. Almost everything else is green. Oscar, again, dumping because of healthcare. I don't think it's an Oscar thing. So if you're an Oscar, I wouldn't be too upset about this. It seems like a Molina healthcare. It's something you need to be cautious of. If you're an Oscar shareholder and you have a heavy position, I think you need to go through Molina's earnings and be like, what trends in the earnings could be applicable to my stock, aka Oscar, in the healthcare space? And if there's not any trends that are like a proportional reason for why Oscar would also report something that's as bad as what Molina reported, then it becomes a buy the dip. But if there is, some potential weakness in the overall sector, Oscar could have a crappy earnings. And so that's the one thing I think that's important to look at if you're an Oscar. Hoodie trying to go back to 130, 129.50. Tesla down 4%. Still, Tesla recovering a little bit. And the S&P still green. Where's fear and greed? We were at extreme fear yesterday, by the way. We were at extreme fear. Someone bought $10 million worth of at-the-money puts on Tesla. All right, so you're getting some put option flow come in for Tesla that's more bearish. We are still at fear, folks. We are still at fear. Dude, I know people hate this index, but it's been pretty accurate. It's been pretty accurate. And I can't even imagine what extreme greed would look. If we are 1% away from all-time highs on the S&P 500 and we were at extreme fear, I mean, are we going to like 15,000 on the S&P to get to extreme greed? Like, what's it going to take? Like, it's pretty incredible to see this index act the way it acts. But so far, we are back in fear. 29 on the S&P. Nebius goes green as well. Nebius and CoreWeave continuing to go green. And then Oklo still red, dude. Oklo still red. S&P trying to get back to all-time highs, and Oklo cannot recover even $1 of what it lost over the past 2 days. The quantum stocks are massively green. I mean, if it wasn't for that Wall Street Journal article, the quantum stocks might have had the bottom fall out today along with Oklo, because you're seeing a rebound across the entire market except some of those momentum names like in Oklo. And the thing about the Wall Street Journal articles, we don't even know if it's fully true. And for those that don't know what I'm talking about, the Trump administration is thinking of taking equity stakes in the quantum names. So, maybe when we get clarity on that, we're going to see how the market reacts. But as of now, that is what's holding up a lot of these names to still be green. S&P 670. S&P still 670. Amit, what do you think about the forward PE for the market as we're in the 22 to 25 range? I think it's justified. I think it's very. I don't think we need to be at an historical PE of 16 to 18 times when you have the quality of companies that we have in the market right now that are putting up the earnings growth that they're putting up. I mean, again, the way to push back against the high earnings multiple on not only the broader index for the market, but any stock is, are they growing? Like the people that hate Palantir's valuation, which I understand, I get it. I get that quantitatively it's hard to make sense of it, but is Palantir growing? Top and bottom line. And are they growing? Not just like growth. Are they like growing? And the answer is yes. And when that stops, the stock will get hit. But until that stops, which, if you don't see the trajectory of that stopping anytime soon, then the valuation could be justified. But on some of these names where there's like just no growth, there's nothing there, that's where it's hard to make sense of it. So for the S&P, there's growth. There's 10% earnings growth. You're lucky to get, 5 to 6% earnings growth on a good year. The fact that we're getting 10 to 11%. With companies that have massive margins because they're tech companies, that's why I think you can make an argument for the multiple. SoFi right here, 3% growing through 28, which is nice to see. Stock got all the way to 26.40 yesterday. So 28 on the S&P or on SoFi. If you look up Oklo's address, it gives you a place when you search. It's a normal house with no office building. Yeah, I've seen those pictures of Oklo. I mean, that is also kind of weird. It's true for a lot of these companies. If you look at if you like look up their office address, this is what the Oklo headquarters looks like. I mean, maybe there's a bunch of people here designing the next generation of nuclear energy in the United States of America. Or maybe it's just a random location because they just needed a spot to put on their SEC filings as a location. But It is definitely weird. It is definitely weird. Figure, robotics company, Brett Adcock posted, Figure's new B200 cluster is now online. These are a bunch of Blackwell GPUs that you are looking at, folks. Some analysis right here. 33 units in sight that look like Supermicro 10U systems, each with 8 GPUs. Total cost estimated by Grok is $14 million. We are not really looking towards the demand for humanoid robotics training and how much NVIDIA is going to make off that, including AMD. I mean, all those companies that supply chips. These are only 8 GPUs. I mean, Figure is trying to sell billions of robots. So the fact that, the total cost was this for $14 million, you can imagine that these companies are going to be spending hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars on GPUs over the next 10 years if humanoid robotics as a thesis plays out. And, that is another growth vertical for NVIDIA that might not be factored in. 181.50 is what you have on NVIDIA. Nebius right here, that's up 5%. Look at that, 104. 104.65 on Nebius. Yes, SMCI had net sales of $5 billion versus the expected ones, which is why SMCI taking a bit of a hit right here, but it is recovering from where it was in the pre-markets. And CoreWeave is also green as well. Thoughts on the 7.4 trillion in money markets, coiled spring waiting for the Fed? Yeah, that's pretty much what I think. I think it's a coiled spring. I think eventually that money is going to come out. Now, again, we got to have really good earnings growth for that money to have a reason to come out, but we're getting it so far. And I know Tesla and Netflix haven't been the best examples of it, but next week, you're going to really see if people want to bet on Meta, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, etc. They're going to have to put up those numbers. Amazon right there, 220.41 on the day as well. Did CPI leak? To be honest, given this green, maybe CPI. Usually it leaks at 3:30 though, not in the morning. It's not even 10 a.m. yet. But we're going to see if we do get some more people caring about CPI. Amit, I think you're right. Grab is being manipulated. Look, that's my thesis on it. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm open to listening to a different perspective on why the stock has been flat after trading 1 billion shares in September. A lot of that being institutional. I mean, again, here's the most important thing to understand about Grab. It got to 660 in September. 1 billion shares were traded. And I am not Eric Jackson. I'm not standing in front of a celebrity's house telling them to buy a share of Grab every single day. I personally cannot create a retail movement. I know I'm one of the bigger names that talks about the stock, but I'm not the guy that's created this massive movement. I mean, it's just, Grab's also not even an interesting enough company like an Opendoor inside of the United States that has all these elements to it to get people excited. So I think a lot of those billion shares that were traded in September that got the stock to move as high as it did was not people on Robinhood. You don't see people with Robinhood screenshots that have 400,000 shares like you do with Opendoor. I mean, I've seen so many of those screenshots over the past month. I really do think it was big money. So then the question becomes, why is the stock down from where it was in September? Well, I think it's also big money. That's either setting up for a big earnings move. They wanted a cheaper price, or you have the shorts that come in and it's a game between big money versus shorts. And the only way for one of the entities to win, just like it was with a lot of other companies when they were stuck in this phase, is earnings growth. And so realistically, I think if Grab can put up the numbers, then things can change. But until then, I think it is manipulated. But I really don't think this was a retail pump and dump when it got to $6 or $6.50 in September, because retail just doesn't care enough about the name. They just don't. It's a Southeast Asian company. The retail there's so many AI data center shit. If this was a Bitcoin miner, yeah, if this was a quantum nuclear, but this is not. This is just Uber for Southeast Asia. So to me, it's not the most exciting from a retail perspective. And that's why I think the stock kind of going up and then going down is more manipulation than anything. But earnings is going to give us the good story, or earnings is going to give us a story. And if that story is good, which I think it will be, then we're going to see how the stock ultimately reacts. Yes, Triple V has millions of shares, but at the end of the day, not everyone is Triple V that has millions of shares. He's, one retail investor. I think the majority of the institutional float, which is now 85%, is big money on this name. Where's Amcor on the day? Amcor 31. Okay, Amcor right there, up 2.6%. Intel, is that green? 37. Oklo goes green. There you go, folks. Well, no, it's not green yet. It's 50 cents away from it. It's close to being green. Once that goes green, we can go back to all-time highs on the S&P. That's what we need. That is what we need. Oh, we got home sales from the US. Hold on. Let me see if I can get those numbers. I didn't know we would get these existing home sales because the government shut down. But yes, we have them. Let's pull it up right here.
Joe Livornia about those findings. And Tesla
rose 1.5% from August to a seasonally adjusted annualized rate of 4.06 million units. That's a little less than the street was expecting. Sales up 4.1% from September of last year, and it is the highest pace in 7 months. Now, this count is based on closings, so people inking deals in July and August when mortgage rates were coming down, though not quite as low as they are now. Inventory is the headline, though, up 14% from a year ago to 1.55 million units for sale at the end of September. That matches a 5-year high, but it's still much lower than historical averages. At the current sales pace, we're now at a 4.6-month supply. And that continues to pressure prices. The median price of a home sold in September, $415,200, up 2.1% year over year, and the 27th consecutive month of annual gains. First-time buyers making a little comeback, likely due to falling mortgage rates. They made up 30% of September sales, up from 26% a year ago. 30% of sales were all cash. Homes are sitting on the market longer, though, an average 33 days, up from 28 days a year ago. Back to you, Mike.
All right, Diana, thank you very much. Now to Washington, and two big stories out of the White House moving markets this morning. New energy sanctions on Russia and reports the government is eyeing stakes in quantum computing companies. Let's get to Eamon Javers with the latest on both of these storylines. Eamon.
Yeah, Mike, President Trump's decision to impose sanctions on Russian oil companies Rosneft and Lukoil came after the breakdown of talks between the U.S. and Russia for another face-to-face meeting between President Trump and Russian leader Vladimir Putin. A senior White House official told me yesterday that the president decided to put on these additional sanctions because he wants to see results in the peace process between Russia and Ukraine. President Trump explained his reasoning for this during his meeting yesterday with the Secretary General of NATO.
Certainly have an impact. They're massive sanctions, and sanctions on oil. The two biggest oil companies, among the biggest in the world, but they're Russian. They do a lot of oil. And hopefully it'll push, hopefully he'll become reasonable.
And separately, guys, the Wall Street Journal, as you mentioned, is reporting that the Trump administration is ready to take equity stakes in several quantum computing firms. The Journal reports that the U.S. government could invest a minimum of $10 million in each company, and that the firms under consideration include IonQ, Rigetti Computing, and D-Wave Quantum. White House officials have not confirmed the accuracy of that report to CNBC, but officials have told me generally several times that there are quite a few companies that are under discussions with the administration right now to turn over a share of their ownership in exchange for government investment. Back over to you guys.
All right, so home sales, slight miss. You got the Russia sanctions that we talked about in the morning, and then the quantum names, folks. I mean, quite literally, Donnie T saved the day. These stocks probably would either be flat or continue, the negative pressure that they've had over the past 2 weeks now. Government comes in and backstops it. And the fact that they haven't confirmed the rumors from the Wall Street Journal is interesting to me because, if they were not investing, they might have already just said, no, we're not investing, but they haven't said that yet. And so you might get an announcement later in the day and they say, yeah, we're thinking of putting 10 million into D-Wave and IonQ and all those companies. And then boom, that only further legitimizes them. Now, these stocks are still down a decent chunk over the past couple of weeks, but a day like this kind of gets them back in their mojo. Tesla right there, 3.3%. That's still down 424, although it is recovering. S&P 669.79. Yeah, I mean, 10 million investments is more than the revenue that some of those companies made last quarter, which is also kind of crazy. So if you closed out the short yesterday, if you have these inverse short funds or whatever, or if you're actually short or you have puts, yesterday was the day to close them out. Now, granted, who could have known that there was this type of announcement coming after hours? But if you did know, then obviously you made some money and you're able to kind of navigate how the government was thinking about it. Now, there was a little bit of option flow towards the end of the day on people buying options on the quantum stocks. So one could argue that, some people knew this was happening, which of course, that wouldn't surprise me for the people that did know. But regardless, it definitely caught a lot of people off guard, especially if you were short. And as a result, now you're seeing these names continue to get some love. I don't know if Chris still has a short fund. But Chris went short like $30 ago, or not 30, $20 ago. So I think even with this move today, I think he's still profitable on it. Because he went short a couple weeks ago, and it's still down a decent chunk from a couple weeks ago. I think we'll have Chris on for Macro Thursday today, so I'll ask him if he's still in it or not. But yesterday was the best day to kind of sell out on those names. Trump is speaking at 3 p.m. today. Trump is speaking at 3 p.m. Robinhood back to 130, touched it for a bit. Get a little bit of move right there. Bro, 10 million is probably more revenue than all three quantum companies made all year combined. Look at Dougie. Dougie's now a bear. Dougie sells his quantum, and now he's bearish. Now he's like, you know what? It is stupid. No. Well, Doug, you made good money, dude. You made good 6 figures. And there's no way you could have known that there was going to be a strategic government investment, which we still don't even know if that's happening or not. But even the thought of that's getting them excited. QBTZ is down 40% today. My goodness. And that's because D-Wave's up 20%. That's the opposite of the inverse fund. Well, I forgot this is double leveraged. I forgot. This is not just inverse. This is double leveraged inverse. So yeah, actually, if you bought yesterday or you bought even a couple of days ago, you're probably red to break even. This is not just the inverse. This is double leveraged inverse, which could really wreck you. So there you go. That's definitely getting a bit hit right here. S&P 0.28, 669, still kind of green on the day. Now, hold on, QBTZ, where was this a week ago? If you look at this a week ago, it was at 24. Now it's at 13. Okay, so you've had to basically buy it. Well, no, it went to 24 yesterday. Yeah, well, I mean, look, if you bought it around this $11 range, you're still green. Chris bought it, October 15th? Yeah, Chris should still be green. He bought it at 11, roundabout. I think he even tweeted about it. We can get the price that he tweeted about. So he should still be green, but yesterday was the day he could have made some big money if he actually sold it. Yeah, dude. Wild. So quick. So quick this stuff can change in an instant. Yeah, look, he bought it at $10. This was on what date? This was October 16th. So the fact that he's still green on this, even after a 20% move that D-Wave had today, shows how much the actual underlying stock got wrecked. But yesterday it was at 24. So yesterday he was up more than double. Today he's up like 30%. But that's what you have on some of the quantum names. S&P, that's still up about 0.25%. Google, is that green? Google, 253. Google signs corporate agreement to back a gas power plant featuring carbon capture and storage technology. All right, Google is going to freaking keep doing what they're doing. We're getting more and more data center announcements from Google across the entire board. Some of these domestic, some of these international. India was the big one, 15 billion that they announced last week. And now you're seeing more power announcements from Google as well. SoFi, that's getting a little bit of a hit. SoFi, 2770, down from 2815. Meta getting a bit of a move. Where's Meta? Yeah, we haven't seen 739 since September 30th. It's been a month since we've seen it in the 740s. Since then, it got all the way down up to the 691 level. So look at that. There you go, 740 on Meta. It's been a minute since we've seen Meta even get close to these levels. But you are seeing that now. Oklo, are we officially green on Oklo? We are officially green on Oklo, 120. All right. Some of these names getting some of their momentum back. Intel right here goes flat on the day. Disney still down, and then Square down 0.53. I was talking to someone who works at Square a couple days ago, and he said he takes all of his restricted stock options that he gets in compensation, and he sells them the day he gets it, and he buys Robinhood. So he's like, he has no belief in Square. He's just there for the healthcare, to be honest. And he takes that money and he just dumps it right into Hood. So It is crazy because like, you know, he's such a Hood fan, but when Square got into the S&P over Hood, he was happy, but because he works there. But even he was like, dude, Hood needs to get in. So it's kind of wild. But this stock right here, 76.28 on the day. Google covers all your needs as an investor from AI, quantum robotics, FSD search, and products. Yeah, I mean, let me ask this question to the chat because there was this conversation on X yesterday that I thought was really interesting. So here is the question. By the way, 79% of you said no on green or red, or on if you're buying the Tesla dip. Will Google be more valuable than NVIDIA one day? The question is Google the dark horse candidate to actually be the world's most valuable company? Will they outpace NVIDIA? They're at 3 trillion. NVIDIA's at 4.4. I know 1.4 trillion is some distance, but is it really that much distance if Google's able to put up some really good growth numbers? Who knows? Maybe. Maybe there's a world where that changes. But I would be curious to see kind of what some people think on this. Apple signing a satellite deal with SpaceX. As per the information, they are reporting that Apple has signed a satellite deal with SpaceX. The goal is direct to iPhone connectivity via Starlink. Testing already underway in multiple US states. Apple's been ghosting satellite suitors for years. Elon's Starlink now gets the Apple seal of approval. Dude, that'd be a big deal if Apple links up with SpaceX. You've had a lot of companies like United Airlines that have started to work with SpaceX just because it's way better coverage. I mean, that could actually be a really interesting announcement if Apple works with them and Elon and Cook are working together. That is the information right now reporting that Apple and SpaceX could be working together. SMCI still taking a dump. Are we getting hit? SMCI still taking a dump, down 6%. Down 6%. Yeah, Google also owns 7% of SpaceX. That's the other thing. It also owns 7% of SpaceX. Gold is still pumping. You're getting a little bit of a move right there on gold. ASTS, that one still flat from yesterday, but green on the day, up 2.1%. They can't even get Siri right. Yeah, I look, I think Apple's getting the multiple because they think, you know, the street thinks they will get Siri right going into next year, but I agree. I mean, it really has been a disaster over the past 14 years with them having the head start. Stock draft, Matt still at 41% in the lead. I'm at 33, still down 34% on Duolingo. Steve's at 6, Tanner's at 20, and Chris is at 9.3. So Mr. Matt Money continues to be green at these levels. Do you think Google will dip? It's so expensive right here. I mean, look, when OpenAI announced that like browser thing, you had a little 5%, $100 billion market cap dip right there. I don't think Google is crazy expensive. It's just had a lot of a run since that 150 level, but at 250, at 150 was just stupid. 250 is not stupid anymore, but is it like egregious expensive? I don't think so, given their earnings projections. Also, you got to remember, Google's buying back. Amazon and Tesla are the only Max 7s that aren't actually buying back their stock. And once you start buying back your stock, it becomes a little bit of a cheat code in terms of being able to create a base floor for the stock. You know, you might continue to see that for Google as well. Okay. What else do we see right here? Beyond Meat, that one's still getting dumped. Beyond Meat getting hit. Beyond short interest on Beyond Meat at nearly 109% of free float versus 82% on Wednesday. Wow. So the hedge funds are loading up on borrowing shares that don't even exist for Beyond Meat. That stock's still down 17% right here. We have 15 minutes until we get red candles. Yeah, maybe 10:30 slam. We're gonna see if we end up getting it. Amit, will you buy more SoFi at 27, 26.50? I bought yesterday at 26.80. I'm in. So, I mean, it would have to really go down further than that, but I already bought. I'm in. We're going to run it till earnings. And hopefully Tanner's right. And we get a big move. CrowdStrike, all-time high. CrowdStrike. Wow, 517 on Crowd. We don't have any updates on Crowd. No earnings yet. But Crowd continuing to get a move. Yeah, imagine the government taking a stake in Beyond Meat. That would be hilarious. That would genuinely be hilarious. Again, it is also kind of just like this whole quantum thing is funny to me because, again, I don't know, dude. Maybe there is some nationally competitive threat with China and quantum computing that the United States needs to be super, super involved in. Maybe that's the case. But if that's the case, you would take a multi-billion-dollar stake. You wouldn't take a 10 million is not a stake, bro. 10 million is nothing. So that's why it feels like it's nonsense. And then again, when you look at the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Steve Feinberg, who also has a hedge fund, and he left that hedge fund to become the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and then that hedge fund, you look a little deeper, has a $100 million position in one of these quantum names, you start putting the pieces together and say, what's going on right here? Why is the government pumping quantum when they've never really talked about all the defense applications of it, at least in a meaningful way? Or why aren't they taking a multi-billion-dollar stake in these quantum funds? Or why aren't they buying freaking Google if they care so much about quantum and IBM? Because you would imagine Google and IBM are doing some pretty important things versus some of these other companies. So I don't know. It feels like a grift, but we're going to need confirmation if this is even happening. It's just like Twitter lost their mind last night, dude. When that story came out, everyone lost their mind. Because there's a decent amount of people that agree with the argument that in order to have a bull market, you cannot have random names spike up. Like that is more bubblish than bullish. And people just lost their minds. People were like, "Oh wow, so this is what we're doing now. This is what we're doing now. This is how we're subsidizing the ecosystem." But I guess that's how it's playing out. What other positions are in his fund? I tried to find if there were other quantum names. He has a lot of stocks, but there's no other quantum names. IONQ is the only one. They have like 2.4 million shares. They do have EOSE. They do. Cerebras Capital Management does have EOSE, which has taken a bit of a hit over the past couple of weeks, but this stock also is still up a lot for the year. I know a lot of people like the stock in the battery space, up 178% this year. So they do have a fund in that. Restaurant stocks all down on the day. Cheesecake Factory, that's down. Huh, yeah. People are selling off the restaurant stocks today. Texas Roadhouse. Dude, Texas Roadhouse, I think Joseph Carlson's right about it. I went there last week. The line on that freaking restaurant is just like it is just packed every weekend. Texas Roadhouse 175.43 right there. Is McDonald's down? McDonald's is down. Okay, so all the restaurant names are down here. S&P losing 670. That's correct. All right. 10:30 slam. We're 12 minutes away, but maybe it's coming up. I did not take Steve. I went myself. Steve and I went to a place called Uncle Jackson. Let's just say it was better steak than Texas Roadhouse. That's for sure. But it's the most rare steak I've ever had. SMCI getting wrecked right here, down 6% still. Ethereum almost losing 3,800. Almost losing 3,800. Dude, the thing about Texas Roadhouse is the bread, that butter on the bread, that's just like, it's a different type of butter. I'm surprised other restaurants haven't copied it. That cinnamon butter is like, goodness gracious, bro. It's like the best butter that I've ever had with bread. We're now taking steak recommendations from you, mate. Oh my gosh. Cracker Barrel's at an April low. Wait, Cracker Barrel's public? Oh yeah, they are. Down 2%. I forgot because they had that whole branding controversy. Year to date, this stock's down 34%, dude. Market cap of $805 million. Down another 2% today. Down another 2%. Okay, let's see some of the other headlines that we have. We looked at all the earnings. We talked about some of this Trump-China stuff. He's making a meeting at 3 p.m. Oh, Jensen's going to have GTC next week, which is going to be really important. So we're going to see what Jensen says at GTC. The FBI is live right now talking about an NBA gambling bust. Hold on, let's look at this real quick. What are they saying here?
Of prop bets on individual player performance. The bets were placed through online sports books and also in person at casinos. The defendants relied on a network of straw bettors to place the maximum amount of bets to increase their potential profits. Most of these bets succeeded, and the intended losses were in the millions of dollars. The defendants then laundered their illegal winnings in various ways: peer-to-peer platforms, bank wires, and simple cash exchanges. The indictment.
Okay, so you got Kash Patel creating a investigation right here on NBA gambling. I guess with prediction markets, this stuff is only going to get crazier as more and more people enter into that ecosystem around betting. Robinhood back to 130, but you've got more and more of a ecosystem of betting around the entire country. It's kind of wild, bro. I mean, there have been so many controversies of people paying other people to, have players do certain things. I mean, there's been so many controversies around referees back in the early 2000s in the NBA in particular. But it looks like that is one of the new updates here on the day. Yeah, Chauncey Billups, dude. That's pretty wild. Are Cash and Chris related? They are not related. Maybe they're like a distant cousin. Who knows? I feel like every Patel is related in some way, dude. Every Patel in some way. But no, I don't think they're related. Okay, let's see the other stories we have right here. Again, Tesla's still trying to kind of break above the 420. Oh, this was a good update from AMD today. This is like a real use case of AI. Meg Cognetics is using AI on AMD technology to help radiologists deliver faster, more accurate breast cancer diagnosis from hospital workstations to rural screening vans. This is the stuff that I really care about when we get new updates on AI. It's like stuff that has real, tangible impacts and use cases for all of us. And there you go. AMD partnering with a company to make early cancer detection a lot more accessible. I mean, this is the stuff that I think the street is looking for, because if you can detect cancer in people before it happens, I mean, that's massive. Commercially, that would be very, very important for the overall healthcare industry. And then, that would save a lot of lives. So I do think that's something the street cares about in terms of seeing more of that, less social media AI generated videos as like the basis of what AI is being used for. Grab getting some green, Google getting some green, SoFi up 2.6, S&P trying to get back to 670, a little bit of a reversal. Even Tesla 425, that's the high of day for Tesla. Maybe that's getting ready to break green potentially. Healthcare still getting hit. UNH is down, but not, no, UNH was down 2%. Now it's barely down 1%. So still getting a move. BMNR, how are we doing there? BMNR 4838. 4838. NTRA is the oncology play. It's Druck's biggest position. Really? NTRA is Druck's biggest position? Is it his biggest biotech or his legit biggest position? Huh. $26 billion market cap, up 18% on the day. Or on, not on the day, on year to date. Oh, that's incredible. That is pretty incredible. When do you expect Ethereum to move? I don't know. I mean, I really don't. I don't know if there's a way you can expect it to move. I think you just have to keep tracking. Do the use cases continue to grow? And does the overall sector continue to have more momentum? And naturally, the price should continue to grind higher. But that's the problem with options on a lot of these Ethereum plays. Like, you just don't know when it's going to play out. And so we're not in the most obvious crypto winter. Like when Bitcoin was at 15,000 and MSTR was at like $20, that was a crypto winter. So you could say, all right, once we get out of crypto winter, we should have a move. And people who bet hard on MSTR made a lot of money. The problem with this, we're not in a crypto winter, but these assets are still flat. So the question is, is it an obvious time to say they should make a move, or is it actually we are approaching a crypto winter and these assets are going to take a move to the downside? I think the entire thesis of a crypto winter is weird because of all the institutionalization we have. But if the cycle continues the way it has for the past like 14 years. Maybe that's the case. My best bet would be towards November, December, we get a move on Bitcoin and Ethereum because we get the rate cuts. But that would have to be the most important thing. The CEO of ETH needs to be fired. After the Clarity Act, ETH might move. Last bull cycle didn't really have a blow off top. No, but it did, right? 2021 was the blow off top. Bitcoin 69,000. I mean, it was almost prophetic. Bitcoin 69,000. Are you kidding me? And that was the number that we had a blow off top on. November 2021. The S&P had a blow off top in January 22. We got to 478 on the S&P. Even after we knew we were raising rates, people still started buying the market in January. And then we finally got flushed out and everything just, went down. But I feel like that was the blow off top. I think SMCI going down is knee-jerk. Q1 revised down, caused some revenue push to Q2, but they reiterated the 33 billion. Yeah, the SMCI thing is weird. They reiterated the core number for the year, and they mentioned supply issues versus demand issues. So it is weird that it's getting hit as bad. It's not taking all the semis down with it. If we look at the semis, relatively green. SMCI and On Semiconductor are the only ones that are down. Marvell, ARM, TSM, Intel, AMD, the rest of these guys still doing okay. Still doing okay. Are we at 10:30 a.m.? We're about to be. We're about to be at 10:30. S&P up 0.27. We're going to see in 2 minutes kind of how this plays out. Take a look at this chart right here. Shanghai gold warrants have now rose to a record 86,565 kilograms this week. What is a gold warrant? Essentially, it is a digital certificate that proves ownership of physical gold stored in an exchange-approved warehouse. This is a 28x increase since 2024, signaling that a lot of investors in China, whether they're retail, institutional, or just the average Joe in China, wants exposure to gold. So it's almost like a gold futures contract that shows that you have exposure, even if it's not literally physical gold. Gold right there up 2.3% of the day. Silver as well. JP Morgan also said this morning they think gold to 5,000 by end of year is not crazy. They have an 8,000 target by the end of next year and 5,000 by the end of this year. I mean, that would just be a lot of market cap that would add to gold if that plays out. By the way, we don't have jobless claims yet, but we do have a little bit of data from some independent parties showing that initial jobless claims by federal workers spiked 121% week over week after the shutdown. 7,244 people filed for unemployment after they left or after they got fired from the federal government. And this is the highest number since the 2019 government shutdown. So we don't have initial jobs claims yet across the entire private sector, but in the public sector, you are seeing more and more people that are getting laid off as per the government continue to lay off. Tucker Carlson came out yesterday and he said he thinks Bitcoin is totalitarian. I thought that was relatively interesting. He said he doesn't own Bitcoin because he's afraid that he will be controlled by the government.
I spoke at the Bitcoin conference actually last year. I've spoken at a couple of Bitcoin conferences. I love the idea of Bitcoin because I love the idea of financial autonomy. I don't want what I buy or sell to be tracked. I don't want my money to be tracked. It's nobody's business. I pay my taxes. I've never cheated on my taxes. I've been very tempted, but I never have one time cheated on my taxes. And once the money's mine, like I can do what I want with it. And if you find me breaking the law, arrest me. But if you don't, it's none of your beeswax, as the kids say. So I love the idea of the blockchain. I knew some of the people involved in that whole thing. And I still believe in that promise, okay? Roger Ver, for example. I don't know how closely do you follow this, but like, there are people who still believe in that. But it turns out that it is not, to this point, Ben, I hope it will be, a way to conduct financial transactions privately at all. And that really freaks me out. I'm really afraid of a digital currency because that is totalitarian control. If you can punish people, if you can zero out their bank account and keep them from eating, you will have total obedience. Like, that's totalitarian. And I know that young people love crypto because they've been completely screwed in the job market and there are no financial opportunities for most of them. And they know they're staring down a life of if not poverty, certainly a step down from the way they grew up, most young people. And so Bitcoin for them, crypto in general for them, is a promise of like, how can I make it in this world? Like, I would like to have a normal life. How can I do that? And crypto is a way they think that they can. And I'm praying for them. I hope that's true. But I fear that it will become, like so many other things in our country, a scam of sorts.
Who agrees? Who agrees? Tucker says Bitcoin is totalitarian control, and they will track what you do with your money if you give them control over it. By the way, Hoodie making a bit of a move right here. 131 potentially on deck. 130.80 is what we have. I don't know. I don't feel like I'm as educated on Bitcoin. I do think that argument's a little off base, and I don't know if it understands all the technical nuances of ledgers and things of that nature. Ironically, you could say the decentralized aspect of Bitcoin is a way to completely hedge against what he's talking about. I mean, if it's Bitcoin or bank account, you would imagine that Bitcoin is less easier to track than a bank account, even if it is possible to track it. But that is Mr. Tucker's perspective. Iran, are we getting a move right there? Iran, wow, 7%. All right. Iran going green. 55.46. That is up as well. CrowdStrike. Why is CrowdStrike up, bro? I don't see any reason CrowdStrike should be moving the way they're moving. CrowdStrike right there. It feels technical. Feels like a pure technical move, no actual headline. I mean, maybe move going into earnings as well. That could be happening. Why isn't Rumble stock higher beta? You know, I've always asked myself about this because there is a bit of a cult on Rumble, but the company is just so like boring. It's a YouTube competitor for free speech. Like it really has not gotten a lot of people excited about it. I think if there was anything more interesting about this company, you know, you would have some more high beta, but yeah, they're just not. And that's why the stock is basically flat. Speaking of the government ownership based on this quantum news we talked about today, take a look at this. These are the current holdings of the Trump administration. They're up a lot. They got some pretty good deals. It totals about $18 billion that the government is up on in regards to, or that the overall equity stake that they have. 93% of that 18 billion is Intel. Then you got MP, Lithium Americas, then TMQ. Maybe the quantum names join this conversation, but Trump's hedge fund has been crushing it. Even though technically it's our, dude, these are our investment stakes. These are the US taxpayer dollar holdings. So we all own a little bit. All of us own a little bit of Intel, MP, LAC, and TMQ. All of us, which is kind of crazy, but it is the US taxpayer dollar going into this. Robin Hoodie, 131. Robin Hoodie, 131. That is green. That's up 3%. Then Palantir making a move. That's up 2% as well. Amit, would you hold your SoFi if it pumps? I want to see what the quarter looks like. I mean, if we get a really big pump and like the quarter justifies the pump, I think I'd hold on to it. But a move to 35 off of a decent quarter, but not an excellent quarter, I don't know, maybe it's a sell. The thing is, the SoFi reports a day before rate cuts. So I feel like you can't sell on earnings if you have a good earnings, because then you get a rate cut the next day. And maybe it's baked in, but like that should be bullish for SoFi. So I feel like if they give us a good quarter, you just hold on, and then maybe you get a rate cut. And then maybe after the rate cut, you sell. But I really want to see what happens on the earnings and what they'll say. Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of you guys that are not in America, you don't own these companies. But if you're in America here, we are officially shareholders of all these names. Yeah, not me because I'm Canadian. Okay, let's pull up this thing right here as well. So we looked at a couple things in regards to some of these gold price targets. Well, I think this thing is also pretty interesting to look at in the context of what we're talking about. We talked about subprime lending yesterday, that not necessarily being the best. The core report that got stocks to go down, by the way, yesterday is Trump administration considered a plan to restrict globally produced exports to China made with or containing U.S. software. New export controls could curb exports on a wide range of goods to China. That is why stocks puked yesterday. It looks like that report has not necessarily been as legitimate as people thought it was. And there's not going to be massive tariffs on goods and services or export controls that are made with U.S. software. But that was one of the reasons the street was freaking out a little bit. Here's some coverage on the Fed deficit, which is another reason markets got a little weirded out yesterday as some new stats came out. And then we'll keep going from there.
Second quarter, fiscal year 25, we had 34%. So basically, in the 2 quarters that overlap with the Biden administration, 74% of the budget deficit occurred then. From April forward, 2 things happened. One, as you mentioned, the tariff revenues, we're going to probably collect something in a calendar year of about $300 billion. It's an annual rate of nearly $400 billion if you look at the last few months. But what's important, Michael, is that on the spending side, spending year on year in the third quarter of this year was basically flat, up 0.2, and it was down 2.5% in the fourth quarter, or the last quarter of the fiscal year. So the spending trajectory looks very key, and that's why the Republicans do not want to cave to Democrat demands to reverse these spending initiatives, which are going to keep a much better deficit trajectory in place thanks to President Trump's policies.
Joe, I see a lot of the Wall Street research and economists writing about 2026, calendar 2026, and why we should expect some of the stimulative effects of the OBBB coming through. And one of those is expected very heavy individual tax refunds in the first quarter, $150 billion or so, incremental to last year, as well as a lot of the corporate tax incentives. I guess what I'm wondering is whether you're getting the benefits on the deficit side this year because you're kind of over withholding by design and you're giving it back next year. And also, can we extrapolate the spending levels from this past quarter into next year?
So, Michael, on the OBBB, the full expensing of capital, those guidelines, I believe, are almost done. The full expensing for factories, which is very important and will drive domestic production and tax revenues, that's still being worked on. We do need this shutdown to end because at some point we're not going to be able, with the IRS and Treasury working on this, they're not going to be able to fully implement everything in time if the Democrats keep the government closed. So that's important. In terms of the refunds next year, yes, they could be very meaningful for workers, but their incentive, Michael, is to work more. For tariffs, we're going to generate a lot more tariff revenue next year. And given where the economy has been, we're looking at 4% type of growth for the third quarter, 3% plus type growth next year if we get this CapEx, everything in place as we expect. That's a boom. That's going to drive the revenues. Now, on the spending side, Michael, we don't know. We're very optimistic that the last 6 months have put us on a better trajectory. That's why the Republicans want to make sure we don't add back in all this frivolous, inefficient spending that was removed from the OBBB. So that will depend on how negotiations go. I'm hopeful that the trajectory of spending, Michael, is less. And with the strong growth, we can get this budget deficit to GDP ratio down to 5, maybe even the high 4s next year if we get the boom that we're expecting.
Do you expect tariffs to provide consistent revenue or be a one-time benefit to the deficit? Because I know the administration has basically said that tariffs are a one-time price adjustment. So from an inflation standpoint, the view is that it will be kind of a one-time boost and then things will settle down from there. And I'm curious if you're expecting the same thing on a revenue collection side.
Sure, Leslie. I mean, right now, if you look at the CPI or the PC, we haven't even seen that price level effect impact tariffs in any meaningful way in aggregate. But your point is well taken that if it shows up, it would be a one-off price level adjustment. But the tariff is still in effect. So we're generally generating about $30 billion, $30 billion plus per month in tariff revenue. So that will remain in place. Now, over time, over a period of years, if there's more reindustrialization, there's more domestic growth through factory expansion, CapEx, all the things that are part of the bill, then domestic revenues are going to rise. Production goes up relative to consumption. And then organically, years from now, you may get less tariff revenue, but the point is you get more domestic revenue. So right now, these tariffs will continue to generate the revenue in the near term that we're looking for, somewhere in the $300 to $400 billion per annum level.
Joe, appreciate you getting into all the numbers with us. Thank you, Joe Lavoie.
Thanks, guys.
The CEO of IMAX is next, breaking down.
Okay, so a lot more analysis, I guess, right there on how the government is thinking of this tariff revenue in the context of their budget deficit and spend. Robinhood right there, making a bit of a move, 131.90. You're getting everything pretty much going green. SoFi breaking past 28, Grab trying to get to 570, S&P back to 670, NVIDIA back to 182, and then even Tessie, 422. Even Tessie at 422. SoFi as well right now at a high of day. Look, in terms of the deficit spending stuff that he talked about, the only way it really works out is if we continue to grow GDP at 4%, or at least 3.5%, and they're pretty confident that we're going to be able to grow at those levels. I guess we're going to have to see if that ends up playing out. SMCI is still down 6%, but if we could, that probably could get the street a lot more excited about where the state of deficit spending is going. Amazon right there at 220. By the way, speaking of debt, we have just crossed $38 trillion of debt yesterday, officially. So there you go. At this point, I don't even know if these numbers are real anymore. I mean, this is your bull case right here for Bitcoin. But like, I don't know in my lifetime or in my kid's lifetime if we're going to be paying this off. But yeah, 38 trillion across the board for the US. So that's what we got. That's why you buy gold. Yeah, that's why you buy gold. That's why you buy digital gold as well. I missed this announcement in the morning. I'm just seeing it right now. But May Mobility is going to be expanding its AV technology into Southeast Asia with a Grab investment. So I'm just literally seeing this right now. This is a second investment Grab has made. They also invested in WeRide, which was another company working on AVs. It makes sense for Grab because they obviously need to start positioning themselves for an AV future in Southeast Asia, which is not as easy to build as a North American autonomous vehicle future, just given the nature of the roads there. We don't know how much the investment is. I would imagine it's probably in the hundreds of millions, same thing like WeRide. But you do have that one green potentially on that investment as well. 220 right here on Amazon, and then Reddit up 2.94% on the day. Yes, we were at 36 trillion to start the year. That's correct. Nice little 2 trillion in 9 months. This is what we got. Where's Beyond Meat? Beyond Meat is 317. Okay, cool. Up 11% or down 11%, up from 280. 38 trillion is crazy. 38 trillion is crazy. More calls are crossing puts on the S&P now. Okay, so you're getting some more bullish option flow on the S&P. 669.84. If we can end out the week at 670, we ended out last Friday at 665. I think that would be really good progress, especially going into the China negotiations that start next week. And, the question is, can we get those negotiations to result in any meaningful progress? But if so, I think we're going to be in a much better situation. Here was Walter Isaacson this morning speaking on Tesla earnings and some of his thoughts on the quarter.
Building Optimus, the robot, that pay package he's talking about says you have to build 1 million of them for the pay package to click in. And secondly, totally autonomous driving, robo-taxis with no steering wheels. And ever since he was a kid, he used to read the Isaac Asimov novels, the robot novels, when he was a young kid in South Africa with no friends sitting in the corner of the bookstore. And the whole point of those novels is you build the robots they can turn on us. Now, it may not seem logical, but that's been ingrained in him. And he wants control of Tesla because he sees it now as a robot and AI company.
And do you expect that he will get it from the shareholders?
Well, the shareholders are voting in a few weeks, and as you've watched, some of the institutional investors and things like Glass Lewis have said, hey, don't do this. The shareholders voted last time around, as you remember, for that $50 or so billion pay package that's still being held up in fights in the Delaware courts. he's making a big campaign, both on X and then last night when he said, hey, I'm going to walk. I'm not going to put all this AI power into this company and then have it be when I can get ousted. So there's a lot of institutional investors, and they may be pushing back on this, but a lot of people invest in Tesla stock emotionally. So we'll see how the shareholders vote.
Yeah, Elon.
I mean, look, I think he will get his shareholder vote to be on his side. They spent a good chunk of the call yesterday talking about why they should get it done. I do agree, though, Glassdoor and institutional investor services, ISS, the idea that they get to control so many shares, but they don't actually own those shares, aka they get to be a custody of hundreds of millions of shares, therefore they get to vote on behalf of those shares, is kind of ridiculous, especially because they don't own the shares. And so Elon was making the case that we're going to need individual retail investors to get the market to recognize that the pay compensation package really does matter, and that Elon deserves to get paid if they end up 10xing the value of the company. Tanner says, what did you think of the robot army comments? I thought that was kind of funny. And I mean, look, Elon, I was saying this yesterday with Steve. Like, I really wanted Elon on the earnings call to talk about the future of Optimus in a more productive way. AKA, are they going to be able to meaningfully ship Optimus in 2027, 2026? And you didn't really get too much of that. But this is exactly what Elon was saying in regards to the robot army instead. Let's pull this up right here.
When you read about other robots, that they just don't have those three things. So I think we can achieve all those things, those three things, with an immense amount of work. And that is the game plan. So my fundamental concern with regard to how much voting control I have in Tesla is, if I go ahead and build this enormous robot army, can I just be ousted at some point in the future? That's my biggest concern. That is really the only thing I'm trying to address with this. So it's called compensation, but it's not like I'm going to go spend the money. It's just, if we build this robot army, do I have at least a strong influence over that robot army? Not control, but a strong influence. That's what it comes down to in a nutshell. I don't feel comfortable building that robot army if I don't have at least a strong influence.
Great. So, look, that was Elon's point. Meta, by the way, back at 740. I mean, his argument is like, hey, if I build out this massive robot army and there's all this excitement and momentum around robots, and I don't own a significant portion of the company to have the ability to have influence, then what's the point? Which is fair, right? And it doesn't make sense for Elon to be that motivated if he can't actually get the job done. So I think that does make sense. Robin, right there, 131. Oh, I'm getting a phone call right here. Yo, what's up? What's up?
Okay, so real quick on the Elon comments, if you would have played that clip just a few more seconds, he talks about how there are some companies that have founder shares, right?
Yeah.
He mentioned that in a bunch of other businesses that have done it, but he said to his knowledge that it cannot be done after the company has gone public. That is a complete sham. That's not true at all, okay? And you know how I know this is because Toby Luckey, CEO of Shopify, did this. Company, this is completely verifiable. You can look up, the company went public in 2015, okay? Toby Luckey did not have founder shares. He didn't want to build something once it became absolutely huge. He didn't want to continue to build something without having voter share, okay? So in 2022, they did an annual shareholder meet where they approved founder shares, giving him 40% of the voting power after the company had been public for 7 years. It's a complete sham. The dude wants $1 trillion. And I'm fine with that. But just say it how it is. I mean, the whole world's watching. It's not even like Shopify is not a large company. I'm so surprised no one has corrected him on this. It's absolute BS.
So you think he could have got founder class shares to the level that like a Zucks has it over the past 10 years, and he's making up an excuse to get a higher compensation package by making this robot army like concern that he now somehow has?
He wants $1 trillion if the company's 8.5 trillion. I don't know what the exact percentage is, but in my head, that's a lot lower than 40%. You know, and so the voting share that he's asking for doesn't even align with what Toby Lucky had approved. And I honestly think that shareholders would be much easily convinced to give him 40% voter share than to give him $1 trillion.
Right. Because they trust his judgment more.
I trust his judgment.
Well, why do you think he hasn't campaigned for getting that voting share over the past like 10 years?
I don't know.
It's kind of weird, right? You would think he wants to have massive control over his own company. I mean, Zucks has almost like 60%, if I'm not wrong, of the voting share. So it is kind of weird, right?
Yeah. And some people are saying that he's not actually the founder.
That doesn't matter.
I don't think that. Yeah.
Wait, hold on. People think because he's not the founder that he can't get founder shit. Guys, he is Tesla. Elon is Tesla. Okay, so what? He's not the founder. And by the way, whenever Elon's asked about being the founder in interviews, he gets pretty upset because he's like, bro, there was 2 people there. They did absolutely nothing. They were there for a year and a half, and then he turned the business into the $1 trillion company that it is today. So just because he didn't literally incorporated himself in Delaware does not mean that he's not the key part of this business.
Yeah. It's what we call founder shares, but to my knowledge, it doesn't actually mean that you were the director that signed the official document to create the corporation. You know, it's just a way of saying that this guy is the one running the business.
Yeah, you can call them,
which is true.
You can call them anything you want. They just have to be. They have to give him the voting rights. That's what really matters. That's a fair point. In general, if you still held Tesla, would you vote for the compensation package, or no?
I don't know. Honestly, I'm more hesitant on this round than the last one, and honestly, a lot of it because of these weird comments about like robot armies and stuff. It is such a dystopian future, and yeah.
But do you think it's a good deal that he gets $1 trillion if shareholders also get to 10x at the same time?
Yeah. I don't even know if I'm convinced that it's going to happen. So I guess I would allow it to happen. I guess I would sign up and hope that he pushes towards it, but I'm not even sure that it's going to go through.
No.
I'm a big humanoid robot believer, but I also think this is like whenever he said FSD is coming in like early, like 2017, 2018. Like I think it's actually going to be a lot longer for these things to be developed. And all of these comments about how robots are a 2026 phenomenon and AGI is 3 months around the corner, like all these, I don't believe it. I'm seeing no signs of this. I think there's improvements, but the massive improvement that they're talking about, I'm not seeing it. Brett Adcock can talk about how his robot's from 2050 and then it breaks a cup on the, like, I don't know. They're going to be great, but they're not going to be replacing plumbers and electricians for over a decade.
Yeah, and look, I'm invested in Figure and Apptronik and some of these robotics companies, and even I will admit that they're not doing anything useful yet. So, like,
yeah, I think they'll be doing useful tasks, but just nothing that is what Elon said is an infinite money glitch. They're going to be folding laundry, and that's fine. Like that's awesome, But these are just my beliefs.
Yeah, well, Elon also said Optimus production will start in 2026. So the fact that production is starting then becomes the question of can they actually sell it in 27? And the AI has to be good enough for it to be commercially viable in a year and a half, which maybe it is, maybe it's not. I mean, we got to see how fast they move. But if it's not, then it just might be a 2030 story versus 27, which is not the worst thing either.
I'm a huge believer of Elon. Just last comment, real quick. The other comments of this chip that they're developing with Samsung that's going to be 10x better than their competitors. Come on, man.
That was confused. What was your take on that? Because he was like, we're not trying to replace NVIDIA, but we need a custom ASIC that's better than NVIDIA. And I was just like, I wasn't really following why exactly he said that.
I think every company at Tesla scale should try to create some version of a custom ASIC. I think they're all trying to do this. Okay. Reducing reliance on NVIDIA is very important. Well, at least that's the goal is very important. I don't think it's going to happen. But the idea that he goes, hey, we're not going to replace NVIDIA, but we're also going to have a chip on a performance per watt basis that's 10x more powerful. Why would you ever call up NVIDIA then? You know, it's just, I think the claims now, I'm just kind of over them. I just find it's all a little exaggeratory. The stock is not lining up to the claims. It hasn't for years. Yeah, I don't know. And I don't think the stock cares either, because we end up seeing the stock down 4% while he's talking about this chip beating out NVIDIA. No one's believing him. The stock crashed on those comments live in real time. Like, so he has a core audience, but trying to get new investors in to buy in at this price is going to be hard. And, hey, if you can get to 8.5 trillion, it's still worth a pretty good bid here. But I think there's other investments that are much cheaper. Very easy to buy at other things, at other companies with also very good products that they're creating.
Tanner, last question for you guys. This is Tanner's Twitter, so please make sure to subscribe and follow him there. So I'm in SoFi now, 2685. I'm in. Are we going to the moon next week? Just be careful with how you say it, because YouTube might ban the video. So you have to choose your words with how you.
Everything I'm seeing, I'm super excited. I think this is going to be SoFi's best quarter by far. I think the growth rates and the margins that they're about to put up is going to scare the shorts. Like, just Wall Street's not even remotely close on their estimates going into earnings of what I'm expecting. Not even remotely close. And we're seeing it from, app downloads, website traffic, Lending Club, every large bank, credit cards, brokerages. SoFi does it all, and none of it is looking weak in financials right now. None of it. Lending Club just put up huge growth, and to try to compare Lending Club to SoFi is like, I can't even make a comparison. They're not even remotely comparable anymore. But it still does show you that the demand, especially from insurance companies, from banks, from all the loan purchasers that Lending Club has, which is very similar to the same customers that buy SoFi's loans, that they are going to explode in loan originations. I cannot wait. It's going to be a fun Tuesday.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Lending Club's earnings to me was also a signal that they're going to have a pretty damn good quarter. And so who knows, man? Yeah. It's a high short. I mean, it's not a super high short flow, but still 8 to 10% of the shorts piling in. It could be. And then you get the rate cut a day after. So you could definitely see some progress there for SoFi.
Yeah, it's we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, man, thanks for taking my call. I just thought this Shopify thing needs to be known.
Yeah, appreciate it, Tanner. Talk to you later.
Yeah.
Later.
Bye.
All right, Tanner's excited. He's excited for SoFi. Not the most excited for Tessie, but Tessie right here, 425. Still trying to go green on the day. You got pretty much everything going green except Tessie. NVIDIA high of day as well, 182. And you got the S&P chilling out at that 670 level as well. All right, folks. I think that is pretty much it for the day. We'll be back on the close. I think we'll have Chris on today for the Macro Thursday. What is the earnings picture for today? Oh, wow. We actually have some big earnings. We have Intel. That's a big one. We have Ford. We have Deckers. We have a couple other companies. Fix, but Intel and Ford are the big ones. Intel and Ford are the big ones. Yes, we'll have a daily recap today. Yesterday we missed it because we went super long with the Tesla recap or the Tesla earnings, but we will have a normal daily recap today. And then we'll keep going from there. Joni, thank you for becoming a channel member. Appreciate it. Terrence, thank you for becoming a channel member. And Axiom, thank you as well for becoming a channel member. Deeply appreciate it. Thank you for being part of the show. What do we have with word of the day? Let's see what we've got going on. Oh, wow. They didn't update it today. Look at that. We don't have a Thursday word of the day. They have the same one from yesterday, Wednesday. Okay, we're going to have to use a different website then today. Dictionary.com is slacking, bro. Carp's going to be on at 3 p.m. 3 p.m. So I'll get the clip of that, and I'll probably post it on Twitter as soon as it comes out. But 3 p.m. Eastern, and we'll watch it on the market close when we get into the end of the day. We need a fun word of the day website, bro. We need a word of the day that's like weird. We need like a really fun website for this. All right. The only one I got is from Britannica. Word of the day is fluctuate. Yeah, I think pretty much all of us know this. To change the lever, strength, or value frequently. Well, I mean, you had stocks fluctuate aggressively to the downside last week, and they're starting to get a little bit more of their momentum back. S&P 500 right here, just below 670. Ask ChatGPT. You know, that is a good idea. Why haven't we asked ChatGPT? Hold on. That actually... See, this is why AI is going to replace everything, bro. Like, look, all these websites now, why do I need to go to these websites if we do ChatGPT? Okay, so what if we say, can you give me a word of the day that is very, what's the adjective? That is very, can you give me a word of the day that is cool to use in my day-to-day life, and give me the definition and sentence example? That's a boring word. Serendipity. Okay, no. Make the words not common. They have to be like really different from regular words. Oh, uncommon, I should say. Perfect. You want rare, striking words that make people pause for a second, but still fit naturally in conversation. Yes. Word of the day. How do you say this shit, bro? Peregrinate. After quitting his job, he decided to peregrinate across Europe. Can you say the words for me so I know what they sound like? Like really different. You're going to make AI talk that way? Exactly. Yes. See, this is what I need. Look at that. Look at that phonetic breakdown. This is what I need in my life. Peregrinate. Peregrinate. Boom. What does this word say? To travel or wander from place to place. See, have people heard this word before? There you go.
Peregrinate.
I think we use ChatGPT every day, folks. I think we use ChatGPT. Like, we're going to get way cooler words than these random websites putting out words of the days. There you go. That's what we got. All right. This is what we're going to use. This was the word of the day: to travel or wander around. That's what we got. We just wasted so much energy on this. We definitely wasted so much energy on this. You can set up auto tasks and run this once per day. Okay, I didn't know ChatGPT could do that. All right, I'm gonna turn this into an auto task then. All right, so every day this is just gonna give us a word of the day. Every day, boom. That's what we got. And then we can change the prompt some days and be like, give us certain words for different types of things that are going on. All right, that's what you got. Cool. I'll be back on the market close. Carp will be live at 3 p.m. We'll get that clip. I think Chris will be on today. We got Intel forward earnings, and then we'll see if we can kind of close out the end of the week to be as strong as we were closing out for last week as well. All right, there you go. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. I'll see you guys on the market close. Bye, everybody. Have a good one.